Thursday, June 13th, budget information session. And we have Commissioner Flowers is participating via Zoom, and we need a motion and a second and a vote. So we got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Commissioner Flowers, welcome.
Madam Chair, could you clarify who made the motion?
Good morning,
second?
thank you.
And so I can't see when you raise your hand in the Zoom, but if you raise your hand, he's going to keep you on the screen so I can see you. And if by chance I miss you, just interrupt me.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So we can
Madam
get
Chair?
started, and we're going to start with the Health Department. And Chris, if you want to introduce everybody.
All right. Dr.
Thank you,
Cho,
Madam Chair.
come on
I
up.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
So we have Dr. Cho coming to the table, and we have Tony Merrill next to me here. Tony is returning again, but Tony is the budget analyst for Health Department. So with that, Dr. Cho is going to do his own presentation.
Yep. Good morning. I want to start off by thanking the Board of County Commission for the continued support of public health here in Pinellas County. Okay. So what I'd like to always start with is our overarching mission at the Florida Department of Health, which is to protect the community, to promote good health and good choices, and to improve the health of all residents and visitors through integrated efforts. In terms of the county relationship with the state, it's dictated by Florida state statute, specifically Chapter 154, which states that the legislature recognizes the unique partnership which necessarily exists between the state and its counties in meeting the public health needs through a contractual arrangement, something we call the core contract here in Florida. In terms of a little background, in terms of some of the work over the past year, we did provide 1.2 to 1.3 million services annually. This is a number I'm probably most proud of in terms of the health department. In order to meet that overarching mission, we do provide a number of diverse services, including primary care, school health, dental sealants, environmental health, preparedness, breast and cervical screening, among so many other services. So what is our top health and public health priorities here in the county? I do get this question a lot. I do refer them to our community health improvement. We go through this process every 5 years. We look at the data, surveys, and convene partners. And the last cycle, our top health priorities includes mental health and substance use disorder, access to care and social services, and chronic disease and health promotions. And we work with these partners on an ongoing basis to come up with some of those objectives and strategies to tackle these top priorities. Some highlights of the programs and how we use some of our funding. Starting with dental sealants. Dental sealants is a varnish that's placed on permanent teeth, ultimately preventing cavities. And when you look at some of the things like ER visits due to dental emergencies, it really highlights the importance of preventing those things. With our 2 dental sealant teams, we've served 51 of the 53 Title I elementary schools. We couldn't get to 2, unfortunately, due to scheduling conflicts, testing, and such. In terms of the numbers of services we provided, we screened over 7,700 children, which has increased from last year at over 6,300, and placed over 14,000 sealants compared to 12,000 last year. Now, in terms of school health nursing, this is in partnership with our school district. Our role is to try to provide support and expand those services when we can. We provide, with our funding, about 40 FTEs, or positions, to, again, increase those numbers in the schools. Overall, the school health nursing system provided 611,000 services on things like consultation, medication administration, first aid, LPN encounters, nursing assessments, and counseling. And you have to keep in mind they're boots on the ground. They're the eyes and ears of the administration, the health of the students, the families. They're there to tackle any emergencies that may occur, physical issues, and also importantly, the mental health issues that we're seeing in the youth community. And they can make those appropriate referrals. And you can see up there that they provided over 19,000 referrals, not just to the mental health services, but other social services as well. Within the interaction with the students, their return to class rate was 86 to 87%. They are hitting mandatory screening targets, things like vision, hearing, scoliosis, and body mass index, or BMI. That's to measure obesity over weight issues. And really an important point, especially here in Pinellas County, especially over the last few years, they assist with the staffing of our special needs shelters. These are shelters that house the most vulnerable during times of activations, hurricanes, those that are electrically dependent, those are oxygen dependent, and they provide that clinical support for that. Obviously, there's challenges. There's national shortage, a national issue of nursing workforce shortages. And to that end, we are working with the school district on assisting with recruitment, going to job fairs, and we're going to continue to work with the school district on those positions and recruitment. Again, one of our top priorities is opioid overdose prevention. We continue to monitor trends and data through our OD2A grant. Our overdose prevention office takes the lead on that at the health department. We lead the opioid task force in conjunction with our community partners in Operation PAR. Myself and my assistant director, Gail Gaidesh, as well as Commissioner Peters, participates in the Opioid Abatement Advisory Committee, and I'm optimistic with some of those settlement dollars that we can fill in some of those gaps in our substance use disorder system of care. We've also distributed over 1,900 naloxone kits from June to May, and this is life-saving. You can go to any health department and get at no cost naloxone. This is the life-saving antidote for opioids. And to that end, I actually carry one in my briefcase because we know how prevalent it is out there, both as a public health official as well as a physician. And to me, naloxone, it gives individuals that second chance, keeping in mind that addiction is a chronic disease. And by saving that life, they can get the treatment that they need, the addiction therapy, the medication-assisted treatments. And then lastly, conducted multiple educational outreaches, educational campaigns with our community partners. Some quick other highlights. Again, we do a lot of different services. Since July of 2023, we've provided 17,000 families with benefits from our WIC, or that's Women, Infant, and Children Nutrition Services. It's a federally funded program. In the past year, our environmental public health services provided over 14,000 routine inspections, inspecting things like tattoo parlors, beaches, pools, school cafeterias, among others. And our breast and cervical program partnered with mobile mammography units to provide over 1,000 mammograms to those that are eligible. Some more highlights in terms of awards and recognition over the past year. That first picture, we were awarded the Family Friendly Business Award winner by Thrive by 5. The middle picture, we was awarded the Project Public Health Ready. It's an accreditation certification process for public health preparedness. And then lastly, one of our staff members, Julie Goodrich, in our Nurse Family Partnership Program, was awarded the Juvenile Welfare Board a Kids First Award. And with that, moving to the budget, this is our current fiscal year. The overall budget of the health department here in Pinellas County is over $65 million. It's comprised of funding from county, state, federal, as well as local funding sources, including the Healthy Start Coalition, as well as local grants, as well as fees. From the BCC resources, the core contract, we do get $1.7 million this current year. And you can see the breakdown of where those dollars went to. Things like clinical services, which was over 50%, school health nursing, building improvements, environmental health, dental health, and then disease control, among other things. For the upcoming fiscal year, the resources provided by the Board of County Commission through the core contract agreement approved in the annual budget, totaling a little over 8.1 million. This is from the ad valorem tax, a millage rate of 0.07, 13 mils. At this time, we are not asking for any increases in the fee schedules. The big cost, as you saw from the pie chart, is capital projects. We do have some aging buildings, including roof repairs for our St. Petersburg site, generator replacement in 2 of our sites in Clearwater and St. Petersburg, and then a multi-year plan for our St. Petersburg site. And the reason being is that the building is aging. A lot of our clients are located further south, so working with property management here with the county, coming up with probably 7 to 8 years to look for the sites. And obviously with that comes cost and savings that is needed to plan for that multi-year project.
So while you're off on that, Dr. Cho, I think it's, if we can kind of just talk through this. So typically, the health department, through their budget, puts money into capital reserve to pay for these major improvements. They don't come through our penny projects or our regular capital program that we have at the county. And so that's the reason that you're seeing that a little bit different than in other departments. This is a major replacement, which would be to relocate that building into another location. There's a lot of developers that are interested in redeveloping that area and stuff. So we haven't even began that process. But what he's asking here is to keep the village the same, to increase that reserve to where he'll have money to be able to tackle a project like that in future years. And you'll see that from the outline that we have in the budget. So I just wanted to make sure, we talked through that and didn't kind of gloss over it. That's a major decision point as part of their budget.
Actually, that's all I had, so I'll take any questions you may have.
Okay. Any questions, comments, discussion? Yeah, and Chris can, yes. I think that would be good if you go through the drivers and what you typically do. Oh, great. Thank you. Commissioner Flowers.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, Dr. Cho.
Morning.
I think I may have said this in a previous session. I understand that our property is quite valuable in the location that it is, based on the boom that has really occurred in downtown St. Pete. I'm not opposed or adverse to looking at another site for the health department. I would like for it to stay in an area where people can access public transportation and they can get there quickly. But what I will say is the issue for us wouldn't be selling the building. The issue would be finding another location that we could afford based on whatever profits we would get from the sale of the building to go into a new location. So, I fully support what has been projected here. Thank you, Barry, for that additional detail regarding why the request was coming in the way that it was. But I just wanted to make sure that we kept that in our thought process, especially if you're talking about relocating somewhere within St. Pete.
Okay. Commissioner
Yeah,
Haggard?
just real quick, are the roof repairs and generator replacement for the building that we're thinking about selling, or?
The roof repair is, it's temporary, it needs to occur, even though the building we may be out of the building.
Repairs, not replacement roof.
By the time we get done buying a building, building a building, and it's not even a real project yet, it'll be 10 years. So it's not going to occur tomorrow.
Right.
And
Otherwise, we would
roof
try
leaks
to
are very
make
bad.
temporary repairs.
Roof leaks are very bad.
Roof leaks are very bad.
Roof leaks are very, very,
No,
very
I'm not
bad.
saying don't fix the roof, I'm just asking if they're replacing the roof, if we're finding a new place. And
We
now-
would look at temporary repairs if we,
Okay.
so we absolutely, we understand we don't want to throw good money after bad, right, for building.
Yeah, there are unfortunate leaks. And again, with the time frame of what it is, probably 8 to 10 years to even find a place and move in. I think we would need things like roof repairs for that.
Okay. Tony?
So let me ask Pete and Ed to put the laptop up on the screen here so that you can see the document.
Okay.
And there we go. They were prepared. It's going to take a minute, though. So, commissioners, it's a little small. Let me get it bigger. Pete and Ed were better prepared than I was. So the document is the same for this department as it is for lots of other departments, the other departments that you've seen. We can go down to the bottom of page 1. You can see the drivers there. We have the ad valorem property taxes that we've already talked about. One of the things that drives their budget, and Dr. Cho touched on it in his presentation, is population. As population grows, it drives the work they need to do. And so they are, as we just discussed, talking about the roof project, and they are taking bids right now. And there we go. So it is a collection of property taxes, excess fees coming back from the tax collector, and interest earnings. Those are the major revenues on their budget. You can see the property tax calculations that we have in front of you there. And I'm going to go back up still on page 2. Excluding reserves, it's increasing $347,000, a 4% increase from the current budget. You can see with reserves, it's going up closer to 9%. The increase is mainly due to the grants and aids section, which Dr. Cho already talked about, the core services that are out there. And so that's what's really the biggest driver, $350,000 on the generator replacement, and the core services stay the same. So let's see. After that, it's the same thing Dr. Cho has said. You can see the generators and the St. Petersburg roof. We do have the user fees that we are actually discontinuing, and this is in partnership with the health department. This is actually proposed by the health department, brought it to us, and we are, of course, in concurrence with that. So after that, it's performance measures, so we can take any other questions you have.
Any other questions? Commissioner Eggers.
Was I not listening when you were talking about a proposed rollback in the millage?
No, sir, we had talked about it a moment ago, so I
Okay,
did not
I'm
address
sorry,
it.
I must
No.
have missed that.
No, you didn't miss it in my presentation, but it's what we talked about when the
Well,
administrator was
we
talking.
talked about the capital, in essence, that's the proposal. We could roll back, and they're still budgeted through the planning period, but that would not then allow them to put money into a reserve account to fund up a future building.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't make the connection
So
with
that's,
the option of rolling it back versus not rolling it back and building a reserve.
correct. It's
yeah.
a direct transfer. It's different, though, and it's not a true reserve account. It's planned reserve because it's planned for a capital building. If we don't want to do that, well, then we'll have to address it when we get
understand.
that. But you can do a rollback in this budget. We tried to clearly outline that here. So from an operating standpoint, we could provide for that. But they, again, have traditionally, we've allowed them to plan for and prepare for their capital. So it's a choice we have. But then if we'll have a gap at some point, if we don't do that or don't do it to the full amount, well then, again, we don't have that project ready yet. And it typically hasn't competed for other penny projects. This project likely would be next penny if there's a gap that would need to be filled. But we haven't even begun to plan for that yet.
So is
And I will tell you this also, just because I know it's going to happen. After today's discussion, you're going to have like 10 people that are going to call you about they've got a great deal of buying our land and building buildings, and you're going to get, because I've had them before, okay? And we don't have time to deal with it right now. So we don't even want to go down that path. But we do need to start planning for that here in the future. That's my only point.
So if we leave the millage where it is, we're talking about an additional $700,000 that you'll put into reserves.
Yes.
You're marked for that.
Marked for that future capital
Okay.
project.
Well, you do have that real estate group that you have on board that could do some legwork for you too, if, you know.
We could. I've got them focused right now, but yes. But we could. We absolutely could. Yeah. No.
Your mic's not on again. You turned it off.
I
Thank
agree
you.
with you, Commissioner. I don't think this is I think we can start planning for that in the next year or so. You know, I don't want to take our eye off the ball on the other big projects we have, and I don't have a lot of capacity internally right now to take on new projects, but I think we can at some point. It just, you know, there's a lot that'll have to go into that. But that is a choice that you have.
Commissioner, are you done? Okay. Any other? Commissioner Scott?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a rollback would leave the reserves at about where they're at now, about 3.2. But we got 1.6 million in projects planned for 25. So when we get to the end of 25, we're going to be at around 1.6 versus 2.2-ish.
The sale, the value of the land will not come anywhere near the cost to build a new building, okay? Even in that market.
Just curious, have we done an appraisal or anything on that?
We have not.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions, discussion? No? Thank you so much. It's great to see you, Dr. Cho.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to the medical examiner.
So, Madam Chair, Tony Merrill stays. She is the budget analyst also for the medical examiner. And we have Dr. Thogmartin and Rita Newman, lab director, both here at the table, and he will be doing his own presentation. So I'm going to ask the guys in the back to switch to the PowerPoint, please.
Okay, great. Thank you. And if y'all haven't been to his office to take a tour, I highly recommend it.
Here? Okay. Don't have a lot of slides. I don't know, most of you know me. I'm John Thogmartin. I'm the District 6 Medical Examiner and the Executive Director of Pinellas County Forensic Lab. This is Rita Newman. She's the Forensic Laboratory Director. Oh, let's see. Rita's been here longer than me.
35 years.
35 years. I've been your ME coming up. This December will be 24 years. We operate, ME office operates under Chapter 406 of Florida statute. So essentially what 406 is an unfunded mandate. You guys are only required to fund it. So you fund the operation, you fund the building or provide a building, you fund removals or provide removals for transport services. That's all you have to do. So you don't have to regulate the ME. You don't have to control the ME because it's state regulated and state controlled. You do, however, provide the money, and that's the unfunded mandate, and that's why we're here, is I'm justifying what I'm spending your money on, and are you getting a good deal, since it's a gubernatorial granted monopoly, so there's no way, you know, there's no bidding process, there's no RFPs, it's just here's your ME, give the office money. So I try to do some comparisons, you know, to make sure you're getting the citizens know that their public money is being spent well. And Rita has some data too that will show that. So can we go to the next slide? You got it right there. I do? Oh, holy mackerel, that's great. That's great. Okay, good news. First, we start with the good news. Drug deaths have gone down. I mean, we went climb, really high. We started having the pill mill crisis, you know, like in 05, 07, 08, 09. Then all the pill mills were shut down and we got a little respite. You can kind of see it there, that dip at 2012, 2013. And then nature abhors a vacuum. So here comes the fentanyl and stuff. And it peaks in 2022, but it's going down a little bit, which is good. And I think that could be, you know, mitigation at the borders, shipping, interdiction, but also, yeah. And then they're charging people. They changed the law where if you sell someone fentanyl and it's merely a substantial factor in the death, it's like huge prosecution, and we're going to court now, and it's been, maybe that's the reason. I don't know. So pretty much a summary slide. We're name accredited. We continue to have that. And then lately, though, maintaining our staff levels have been a challenge. I guess it's an inflationary thing, but I've been losing some staff to other offices. It seems like I've discovered that some of my salaries are a little lower compared to others. When did that happen? It was weird. And then we're still getting the turnaround time done. Just for your cost comparison, I provided this chart, just one. We are fourth from the left. This is cost per case. And what this is I even was unfair with us. I did my 2025 budget, and everybody else there you see is their 2024. So we, even when I insert my 2025 proposal, we're still very inexpensive. It's funny, I was looking through there, and I'm going to humble brag here. I was looking through there, and the cheap offices, most of them have had contact with me at some point on an interim basis. Palm Beach, I came from Palm Beach to here. Daytona, interim for a while. Let's see, Gainesville, currently interim. Leesburg, back in 08. Jacksonville did a consult there in about 2012, saved them about $750,000, and then Tallahassee just finished. So all the cheap ones seem to have some sort of consult or contact with us. It's interesting. It's a style of management is really what it is there's cuts down on the waste. Now, Rita, yeah, did you see that peak? I was there as a fellow. I trained in the high place, but I'd had no power. But interesting, that's just woo, right? And the keys, I give the keys a break. The keys, you don't have any economy of scale. You have like 100 cases, so you don't have economy of scale. You got a building, so it's not really fair, but Miami, woohoo! So we're cost effective. I leave it to Rita. She can talk about some award that she gets all the time.
So the forensic laboratory is a part of the medical examiner's office. The reason we're part of the medical examiner's office is in 1985, we were part of the sheriff's office, and the sheriff wanted a gym. And we were where he wanted the gym, so he asked the medical examiner's office to take over the forensic lab. So that's why we're where we're at instead of under the sheriff. But there's an award that's provided every year by the American Academy of Crime Laboratory Directors for the most efficient laboratories in now the world. There are about 219 labs that participate in this, and we provide all of our budget information, all of our turnaround time, and so forth. About 6% of the laboratories win the award. It's for laboratories that operate at least 90% efficiency. The statistics are based on a project out of the University of West Virginia's economics department that looks at benchmarking forensic science. I can sit in a meeting and tell you that we're a very efficient lab, but based on what? Well, this is now comparing us to the rest of the world, and for the fourth consecutive year, we're a winner of the Foresight Award, so I'm very proud of my staff for that. This is the kind of report that we get from Project Foresight, and it's a 200-page report, but I just took out some snippets for you. If we look at the cost per case of these 219 laboratories, the 25th percentile, the mean, and the 75th percentile, and then the first column is Pinellas County, you can see in every section our cost per case is significantly below the 25th percentile. So we really work hard to use the public money in a meaningful way. That said, there is no sacrifice to quality. We went through a project back during probably the end of the recession when the last time we really needed to cut funds, and we did a Lean Six Sigma project. And for those of you who know what Lean Six Sigma is, Lean is to reduce waste, and Six Sigma is quality. And you combine those things to find ways where you're wasting money, wasting resources, wasting supplies, but not sacrificing quality. We actually do more testing per item than most laboratories in the country because I'm not willing to sacrifice quality and have any question. What we do is way too important. We have to have quality work. So we both save a lot of money and do quality work. When we look at the turnaround time nationwide, and this really becomes something on the news all the time, nationwide, you're waiting for the lab, you're waiting for the lab, you're waiting for the lab. As you can see in Pinellas County, you're not waiting for the lab. The 25th percentile for DNA analysis in the country is 99 days. We were at 35 days at that point. Today we were at 25 days. For Postmortem toxicology, we're at 26 days. So I won't read all of this to you, but you can see we are very efficient in getting the reports out to law enforcement. We're not a prosecutorial lab. We are not just doing analysis for court. We're an investigative lab so that the officers can use this to solve crimes faster, that people that are wrongly incarcerated can be released faster. So it's very important that forensic reports get out in a timely manner, and Dr. Thodden has made that very clear to me, and we absolutely, hopefully meet what you require.
Oh,
Yes?
yeah.
Okay, good. He's going to talk about the budget here in a second, but do you want me to go ahead with this, Chris, and talk about okay.
Yeah.
We actually have two decision packages attached to this budget. One is for additional CODIS analyst. CODIS is the national database that we search DNA profiles against. We started DNA at your request in 2010, and we had 2 CODIS employees. They are required to be county employees by the FBI. If you're not a government employee, you cannot touch CODIS. So these are the people that take the profiles developed by all the DNA analysts, put them in the system, search them, report out on any matches. This matches this case from Kentucky. This matches this offender in the offender database, and so forth. We're required by the FBI to have at least 2, and we have 2. We have no redundancy. But as you can see, from 2010, we had about 230 CODIS entries uploaded in 210, and this year we had just short of 2,000. So we have 2 people doing a lot more work. And I need a third person, and it would be a county employee. The sheriff's office is implementing rapid DNA for the booking stations. You funded those instruments last year. The way that works, I think I may have a slide coming up on it, but the way that works and how that will affect us, immediately that if somebody goes into the jail and is put into CODIS, then it's going to search what's called a special index. But that index is very limited. There's only about 5,000 or 6,000 profiles on it. But if the profile is in there, they're going to notify the jail and the case agency on that within 8 hours. But in reality, most of what's in CODIS are mixtures. They are not in that special index, and those will be searched within 24 hours, and that notification goes to our CODIS administrator. Well, on one mixture, you might get 20 or 30 possible hits. That person has to go through every one of those profiles and say, yes, it really is that person, it really isn't that person. It's very time-consuming. Now we do that weekly. We're going to have to start doing that daily, and with the current staffing, that's going to be very difficult. So our first decision package is actually to add another CODIS administrator, which would be a county position in this case. I did have a slide on rapid DNA, sorry. I think I've said all this, so I won't say it again. The second decision package, the CSI effect is gone, okay? Forensics used to be really sexy. Everybody wanted to be a forensic scientist. For every position that I had posted, I would get 100, 200 qualified applicants. My last one, I got 3. One, it's not as sexy as it used to be, and 2, it doesn't pay that well, and 3, our rents are just not enticing. I can't have the same starting salary as an analyst in Kentucky, and they pay less than half of the rent. They're not interested in our positions. So we went in and actually looked at, with the Foresight Project, what our pay scales were nationwide to compare how are we doing, and then we also looked at across the state. There's 5 county labs that are part of the state lab crime system, and then plus FDLE, and we are one of those labs. We're actually in the statute as a part of the statewide system. So what we're asking, and I'll have the slides for that next, but what we're asking for is a 2-year increase to the operational the professional development or professional services budget to raise those salaries to be competitive. Hillsborough County is opening a DNA lab at the end of this year. I think they're starting to set it up in September. Manatee, Sarasota is opening one in the next 2 years. They're in the process and the initial process of that. We have one of the best labs in the country, without question. They're going to try to steal my people, and we need to make sure we have competitive salaries so that doesn't happen. If you lose a forensic scientist, it's not like you hire one and you come in and 6 weeks later on the bench. Training is 18 to 24 months from the day that you hire them. So that means I'm out of an analyst for 24 months, and that I've taken somebody offline to train that analyst as well. So losing any staff is difficult, losing multiple staff would put us in a turnaround time that's totally untenable, and we wouldn't really be able to meet what he requires from me. This is very strongly supported by both State Attorney Bartlett and Sheriff Gualtieri. So some of the risk, and I think I've kind of said that efficiency based on continuing long-term staffing. One of the reasons our turnaround time is so good is I don't usually lose a lot of staff. I might lose a person 1 or 2 years because there's not a lot of competition here locally. Once I get them here, they like working for us. I like working for him. He's entertaining. So we don't necessarily, but when we do lose them, it's very hard to replace them. And now we have competition from Hillsborough, whose pay scale is much better than ours, and from Sarasota, Manatee, and Pasco's talking about adding a lab as well. So it could cripple us if that happens. The housing costs, you're well aware of this. It's hard to entice even somebody out of school. I like hiring people out of school and training them. I actually prefer that, but the housing costs are making it very hard. $2,000 a month or more for a single person apartment just is not going to entice somebody that came out of school with a chemistry or biology degree. And again, the new labs that are being established in the REITs. So when we look at our salaries, this is from the Foresight Project, and this is total compensation. This is not salary. So this includes benefits as well. They don't break it out by salaries. But you can see we're well below the 25th percentile in all sections by quite a bit. But probably more meaningful as we look at, these are the entry-level forensic positions, and I have another slide for the mid-level positions. We're not talking about our positions, but if we look at that, and I look at all the counties in the state and and this is only about 3 months old. So we collected the starting, mid, and high salaries for ones that had these particular positions, and you can say across the board, we're about 20% below the mean for paying our people. And if we look mid-level, we're a little bit better. When we get up into the distant managers and the technical leaders, we're a little bit more comparable. The certified analysts and the senior analysts are still about 15% below, and our quality manager is about 19% below. So I'm very worried about this. We really need to do these adjustments now if we can. Because if we lose staff, it's going to be really hard. It'll take years to recover if we lose more than 2 or 3 people in a unit at a time.
And if I can, just kind of jump to the punchline, because you actually had it on a slide back, but it doesn't necessarily call it out, is what Rita's proposed is to phase this in over 2 years. And so you can see the breakdown of the cost associated with a phase to get them into market competitive. That's no different than what we've had to do in many areas within county government, and you can see the salaries speak for themselves. So.
105 represent?
$175,000 additional, so that would be
to the department?
To the department, yeah. So we'd have to give them an additional $175,000, and then the following year an additional $150,000 to get them up to the competitive wages that she's talking about. That's what she has proposed.
And that you're comfortable with that?
I'm comfortable for asking for that. I know I'd like more, but I think that was the most, yeah. Yes, that would bring us in line.
Actually, the conversation was, I said, yeah, that's great. I don't have any issue with that. She was like, wow, I'm surprised. And I'm like, well, you got to keep your people. I mean, and I actually love it because it was a phased-in approach. It allows us to ease in. And there's light at the end of the tunnel for the staff, so that'll really cut down on people, turning it around. But you can't afford to lose staff like that. And
these numbers will bring us up to the lower part. It won't bring us to the mean, but at least bring us so we're not the lowest laboratory anymore.
And this is what she proposed as part of the decision package was proposed at this.
You were showing some numbers for Hillsborough a couple slides forward. Hillsborough County did not have the forensic because they haven't opened yet. Is that?
Well, they have the positions because they already have opened their firearm section. So, and they'll use the same pay structure, forensic scientist, whether it's DNA or they're adding seized drugs and they're adding DNA. So I do have numbers for them. They don't have forensic technicians, but like their analyst trainee comes in at 57, ours starts at 51. Their casework analyst, so they finish their training, is at about 65, ours is at 56. So, and the numbers I've proposing aren't going to bring us up to that. It's just going to bring us closer to that.
Read it. tell them how Hillsborough Sheriff's Office staffed their firearms section.
In a public meeting? Okay.
It's true, I mean.
So they opened, I think they opened their firearms section the year before last, and they pretty much took most of the staff from FDLE Tampa and just annihilated their firearms section. And that will, they have that risk also with DNA, but we have that risk with DNA too, because.
And we're just seeing that, well, the raises you provide to the sheriff last year. I mean, that's what we're seeing over and over, especially with Tampa, some with St. Pete.
How many empty spots do you have?
I'm sorry?
How many, you said at the beginning, there were some empty, you had some vacancies right now.
I just filled the last one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I brought an intern that I brought back. So I'm okay right now.
But we need to,
My concern is 3 months from now when Hillsborough starts hiring.
They'll see the advertisements. I mean, I just lost 2 forensic technicians because Orlando pays more. And that's when you start seeing it. When they see the advertisements, they look at the job, they look at the benefits. And, it's just like anybody else. It's capitalism. But now, without the CSI effect, there's a limited supply, so it's almost like a zero-sum game, You've got a certain number. I've lost a physician. There needs to be an adjustment. This does not include the physicians. I think I'm all right with that, but this includes her, and I just don't want to see them emptied out. And it's one of the reasons she gets the Foresight Award. It's funny, with the decision package, you may have a harder time getting the Foresight Award.
Yeah, I did the numbers. It won't, we'll be okay.
You're still okay?
We're still okay, yeah.
Commissioner Letval.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this funding over 2 years will get you to the 25 or the 25th percentile?
It will get us to near the starting average for the Florida counties.
Oh, okay.
I don't think it'll get us to 25 percentile nationwide, no.
Okay. All right.
I didn't want to be too greedy because I didn't want you to say no.
Commissioner Long.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So given the level of expertise and the reputation that you all enjoy and have worked so hard to attain, for myself personally, I'm not interested in being the bottom of the barrel in terms of being able to compete. I would be a lot more interested in what the number would be to bring us to the median, where we are really considered one of the best and where everybody else wants to come. Is it possible for you to give us that number just for kicks
Yeah,
and giggles?
I can work on that this afternoon.
So we actually know what it would take to put you where you know you would really need to be?
Yeah, I can get the numbers together, but it's probably about 30 to 50% more than I asked for. Yeah.
But if you don't ask, you don't get.
That's true.
And if we don't know what the number is, we cannot have a really serious intellectual conversation about where our priorities are.
Yeah, I'll be happy to get you those numbers this afternoon. I'll
Thank
send
you
them to
so
Chris. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other
you.
questions? So I'm surprised that we didn't think about your department when we were doing the ambulances and when we were doing the sheriff last year or the year before. So you are kind of behind because we didn't, when we were giving raises to everybody else last year and some the year before to ambulance personnel, it was an oversight. We didn't get your department to bring you up to where you need to be. And you are rated one of the best departments in the country, are you not?
Yes,
sorry?
they are.
You're
Thank
rated
you.
one of the best departments in the labs in the country, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of arrogant of me, but yes, I think we are.
Yeah, no, that's all right. So, and I know you guys do a really great job, but I actually agree because of the competition that's coming in that's surrounding us. I worry that if you don't even get to the 25th percentile, they're still going to pillage your department. And with the new technology, the sheriff's coming on board, it's going to be even harder to get caught back up. So I'm in agreement with Commissioner Long to go, and I'm okay with the 2-year process, so it's not so big, but I would be inclined to agree with Commissioner Long on putting you closer to the mean, where you're not the highest. I don't think we have to be
Right.
Miami, absolutely not, but.
Well, that's Palm Beach. We'll never be Palm Beach.
But get you to the point where you've got some kind of confidence that you're not going to lose all your staff as Manatee, as Hillsborough, because it's so soon.
Yeah.
You still are at risk of losing a lot.
I am.
And then if Pasco comes on board, they're all going to be looking around right here. So I think it would be wise to go higher than what you're asking for. And I don't know if we have consensus on that.
Commissioners, I mean, before you, I just want you to think about what you're saying, because you address the sheriff, you address the ambulance. You've got 30 other departments out there that have the same pent-up demands, okay, and in terms of salary. We're losing them in building inspectors, we're losing, I mean, there's not a single department out there that isn't struggling with staffing because of these same pressures.
But didn't we just give the building department?
No, we did not.
I
Okay,
thought we did.
And many others, we're struggling with how much we do, because there's a reality is if, I'm seeing 6 and 8% raises. I will tell you, you cannot adjust your property tax levy at all if you provide the type of compensation that's being paid in Tampa and St. Pete, okay? I mean, we would struggle to even be able to balance the budget if we paid like that. I only say that because you need to see the impacts, before you make the decisions. Those are the things that I deal with every day. I can't go down the hallway or meet with the department without them presenting data on increased workload, increased competition. I mean, we're struggling, and we adjusted a couple, okay, but we haven't adjusted them all. We have made some interim steps. So, for instance, like at 911, we made an interim adjustments to them. We gave between a 9 to 19% adjustments. I will tell you, the sheriff's entry level now is higher than 97% of the people that work in our 911 center for his dispatch. All right. So the last several years, the market has just went nuts, and people are throwing money at it to solve it. We haven't. We've tried to make adjustments to keep us competitive, but I just want you to understand the totality of the problem, before you go down a particular path. So,
Well, at 25% at a minimum.
yeah, no, listen, I 100% support, and if you want to give her more, again, it's your budget. I'm okay with it. I just want you to, you're only hearing from a few, though.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah, but
Commissioner Long.
I hear what you're saying, Barry, but by the same token, of all the boards I sit on, this is an issue that has been caused because the dictate from county administration was come to me with a flat budget, which in my mind set everybody up to fail, because none of us are living in a flat budget world anymore, and we have to be responsible to make sure that we don't decimate and discourage and just create a huge morale issue within county government because we have no way to keep up. And to me, it's disingenuous when the revenues are so outpacing any of the ways in which we have tried to be conservative and thoughtful and put our budget together. So I do think this warrants a very deep dive discussion about where is it that we put our values in terms of maintaining the excellent work that our county staff and employees have been doing. We cannot keep trying to strangle everybody with their personal budgets and lives to the point where they all look elsewhere because as we already know, we're being outdone by our partners around the region. I mean, this is an issue that I don't know. I just am struggling really hard with trying to do the right thing for all the right reasons for as many people as we possibly can. But every board that I've sat on has had the same kind of issues about how do they comply with the directive and at the same time not lose all their staff.
If I can I know there's some questions. The directive was for them on their budget, not on wages. So we're going to address that separately when we make recommendation to you
Good.
regarding wages.
I can't wait. Thank you. Okay, I'll get
Okay.
off my soapbox.
I see some lights on, so Commissioner Latvala, did you have a question?
Sure. It's more so a comment. Barry's directive was really, I mean, I can't speak for my colleagues, but I can speak for myself. It was my directive too, from our one-on-one conversations, and it goes back to last year when we talked about last year's budget. And last year, the millage stayed the same. And, you know, we had conversations even last year that, you know, the hope was that we were going to provide our residents some tax relief this year. And, you know, I don't foresee us being able to do a full rollback, but I think we can do you know, we can still give our residents some relief and do a partial rollback. But if we start doing, you know, just start spending money, you know, with every group that comes up here, that money's going to go away, and there goes the rollback that we, you know, had been talking about. And whenever I say we, I am talking about, you know, the one-on-ones that I've had with Barry the last, you know, several months. And so, you know, it's not just, you know, his directive, it's, you know, our directive. And so I think that that's, you know, important to keep in mind.
Commissioner Eggers.
I don't know that I could say a whole lot more than what you just said. It was also my directive with Barry, and so I'm at least another person that is asking that we try to curtail growth of government in general. I mean, again, you know, again, it's always a balance. Our residents deserve a certain level of service, and we try our best to provide it. We got to keep people here. And one of the things that's happening, and I saw it in some of the presentations so far, is that as some of our folks are retiring, we're average age about 52 years old. As they start to retire in the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, we're going to be replacing folks with probably lesser salaries, and you're going to have some budget adjustments or some control of that growth that we continue to see. But I think we have to take a look at all of these, like you're talking about, Barry, those areas that were at risk, you know, and getting some of this information. But on the other hand, I share the concern about excess growth. I'm really concerned about first-time home buyers. Again, I'm going to say it again, people that are out there trying to buy homes, our 30-year-old, 40-year-old kids, they can't do it. I mean, whether it's insurance or whether they're bearing the brunt of this of the tax increase that is estimated at 10%, 9 or 10% growth. And you know we're covered by Save Our Homes cap on commercial and Save Our Homes cap on residential. So somebody's paying 15% increases or market value prices. We just have to be careful. I mean, again, I think too much knee-jerk reaction. I appreciate your perspective, and I appreciate your careful increase that we're talking about. And I don't know that we don't talk about a third year in there or something where you're talking about keep that gradual. I think that's kind of what we need to be looking at as we go forward. But anyway, just had to make those comments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to agree with Commissioner Eggers and Latvala. I mean, my understanding of the directive was absorb inflationary pressures with the exception of a general increase across the board in salary and increases in health insurance, which I thought was smart, and I support that. When we run across departments such as what we're hearing today that maybe were left out of the last one, that's with what they've explained, I mean, I think that deserves a look and see what that effect is, and then we can debate that and we can talk about that. So that's my comment.
Okay. So I'm not sure if we have consensus on anything about this, but I think I'm hearing we all support that, what she proposed. And I think, I don't know if we have agreement that maybe it should have a slight bump in those 2 years. And that's something, Barry, you can look at and
Yeah,
come back
why
to
don't,
us.
why don't you let me, because on the 16th of July, I'm going to present a recommended county, a budget. Rita can submit back additional information, and then it's on your side of the house, and you can make other adjustments if you want. You can see the corresponding impact.
Yeah.
We're in agreement in concept. I think we're in agreement in concept with a lot of the adjustments we've been making that you probably don't see because they don't come here within county departments just to keep us competitive. And we're looking at more. You know, this has been a huge, we've been kind of chasing our tail, and it's really, really hard, I think, to the point because, you know, last year, you gave us a huge increase. That was to keep the lights on from the contractual increases that we've seen. And we were able to make some adjustments, but, you know, it's been really, really hard because we thought it would maybe, you know, kind of steady out, and it hasn't. We've continued to see, especially in a few key areas around us, continue to significantly increase salaries. And so, you know, let me take a look at it. I'll present a recommendation. We still then have 2 months before you adopt a budget, and then you can make adjustments as you see fit.
So Commissioner Flowers got back on our screen. Did you have any questions or comments?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you for that presentation, and just maybe a thought process going forward, Barry. Maybe you've already talked about this, but perhaps we need to do just an entire salary survey in comparison across all of our departments. And that way, that may be a way of preventing us from maybe missing a department or two when it comes to salary adjustments. And I'm sure each one of you already know that whenever we go through budget seasons, even though we're talking about her adjustment to level out after 2 years, in those 2 years, you're going to have other government entities who will again have increased their salaries. And we do this all the time. Police, firefighters, it doesn't matter. You know, one organization sets their budget, they see that increase. If that other organization or municipality hasn't set their budget yet, then they use our numbers by which to adjust their requests. So unfortunately, it is a chase. I think someone just said that, chasing our tails, and that's exactly what it is. But I think if we look across the entire county, again, that's not for today, but if we do a salary survey across our entire county to see where we fall, then perhaps that will give us that long-term goal of, you know, in 5 years, this is the anticipated number of people who will be retiring, who are in drop or whatever, especially since now drop has been extended and some people took advantage of that, some didn't. What do we need to do in order to remain competitive in our salary? So thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? No? Okay. Thanks so much. It's great to see you both. And we're going to move on to economic development.
Cynthia here? There she is. Thought we were going to have to bypass her.
Of course not. I was just being polite, but I hope I could go first.
Okay, and Chris, if you want to make introductions.
Absolutely, Madam Chair. Thank you. So next to me, we have Natalie Steiner coming back, presenting on economic development, and James Lewis also. This is not exactly an enterprise department, but the Star Center has very enterprise-like qualities to it. So James will be presenting on that in the midst of all this. Over at the departmental table, of course, is Dr. Johnson and Greg Concannon. Greg runs the Star Center, and so the two of them will be presenting on department things. So with that, I'll turn it over to Natalie.
Good morning, Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be here with you all this morning to present the FY25 budget for economic development. We will begin by discussing the department's efforts towards finding efficiencies, starting at the bottom of page 1. All of these efficiencies are specifically for the general fund. For FY25, the department realized reductions of $127,000. In FY24, the department realized savings of $28,000. And moving down to page 2, in FY23, the department realized savings of $57,000. Moving down the page, we will take a look at our topics for discussion. The Star Center is projected to face a fund balance shortfall within the next 5 years. The department is exploring long-term strategies to address this, including potential partnerships for property redevelopment. Next, the department allocated $100,000 in FY24 for the Employment Sites Program's infrastructure phase. This is moving on to its implementation phase, which is set to begin in FY25. Finally, the Small Business Enterprise Program has experienced increased utilization, with FY24 set to yield a record of $38 million in contracts awarded. Headed into FY25, the department will continue to refine the program and monitor the impacts of increasing the purchasing threshold. Moving down to the middle of page 2, we will discuss our FY25 budget drivers. Economic Development has 2 funds, the General Fund and the Star Center Fund. The FY25 budget minus reserves decreases $207,000. Revenues for the Star Center Fund increase $189,000, and this is due to a $332,000 increase in utility charges, which are offset by associated expenditures. Personnel services decreases $82,000. This is due to several vacancies being filled at a lower rate, a 3% salary adjustment on the midpoint, and FRS actuarial increases were also applied. The FTE count remains flat at 35 FTE. Operating expenditures for the department overall increased $240,000. This is attributed to the associated increase in utility charges for the Star Center Fund. Capital outlay expenditures decreased $338,000, which James will expand on in the next section. And finally, reserves for the Star Center Fund increased by $2.2 million, which is also tied to the capital work that James will discuss with us next in greater depth. And with that, I will turn the presentation over to Chris Rose and James.
All right, good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'm James Lewis, Capital Budget Analyst with the Office of Management and Budget. So for the Star Center's FY25 through 30 6-year capital improvement plan, the 6-year plan is decreasing over the current FY24 through 29 capital plan, and that's due to the expected completion of 5 projects in FY24, and that includes fire alarm replacements, fire pump replacements, 2 air handler unit projects, and a roof recoating. Looking at the FY25 requested appropriations, they are decreasing by $210,000. So that's a slightly different number than Natalie just pointed out for capital outlay. And that's just because we do make a distinction between capital improvements and machinery and equipment capital outlay. So vehicles, forklifts, large computers, things like that aren't actually included in capital improvements. Those are more infrastructure fixed assets. So the FY25 requested appropriations is $1.6 million, and that is pretty close to what was proposed and adopted last year, and it's also in line with actual expenditures over the last 2 years. The Star Center Fund, as Natalie mentioned, there's a projected shortfall sometime in the next 5 years. Right now, they're balanced through FY26 with additional revenue needed in FY27. So last year I came to you and I said we're balanced through FY24, we'll need additional revenue in FY25. It's not that we've identified additional revenue, it's just that they've continued to defer capital out into the later years, and that is keeping them balanced. It does have a cost of its own. It's also dependent on the master plan and what direction the Star Center determines to go in the future. Increased funding requests. The Star Center does not have any this year. They have had some small increases in all of their roofing projects. It's about a 1% inflation increase for silicone and hydrostop, I believe. And they've also built in an additional 10% for future kind of expected inflation. But all of their other projects have remained stable. And the Star Center does have one new capital project that they're requesting in FY25. It's going to be the Building 100 domestic water loop. So it's some I believe 6-inch water pipe that runs through one of the ceilings in the facility. It's had some leaks in the recent past that they've had to go in and repair. Estimated cost, if they were to not do this project and continue to just repair the pipe every time it leaks on the tenants below, is about $8,000 a year. So the cost of the project is estimated at $452,000. And that concludes the Star Center capital report. I believe Chris has some bullets for their governmental capital.
So this department does have two different types of capital, one funded by the Star Center, as you just heard, the other funded by Penny primarily, and a third project, I suppose, funded sort of by itself. So let me get to it. I'm on the wrong page. Here we go. So the one funded by the Penny is the set aside for economic development, capital projects, and housing projects. We talked about it when HCD was up here. So 4.15% of the Penny is set aside off the top to go for these types of projects. And I'm sure Dr. Johnson's going to talk about it when she gets the moment here. And then the other one, of course, is the Innovation Center that has a lot of outside funding in it, and you can see it there, which is very close, and I will let the doctor talk about it. She's just dying to talk about it. So I will, with that said, James's piece is on the Star Center only. The piece I'm talking about is separate and funded by the Penny and the incubator project itself. So with that said,
Commissioner Eggers.
You talked about a shortfall in 27. Is that because we're losing tenant, or because a size of a capital project that's anticipated? What is the?
That's just based on the forecasted revenues, operating expenditures, and capital expenditures. Nothing's really changed, and I'll let Greg or Dr. Johnson talk about the tenants, but this is just based on things that we've had since, in the past, continuing through the future. We continue to kind of push the capital expenses out and decrease the amount in the current year, and that just pushes that out.
Okay.
And it is not due to a loss of tenants. It's really the fluctuation of the capital project.
Okay. Thank you.
So with that, I'll turn the microphone over to Dr. Johnson, and she'll take it from there.
First of all, good morning, everyone. And we're just going to highlight a couple of our accomplishments. 24 has been a dynamic year for us. We really are excited about the fact that we were able to do the grand opening for the ARC Innovation Center, and we are currently recruiting tenants for that building, and things are moving forward with our operator in order to ensure that we maintain that asset for the county. One thing I did want to mention that maybe a lot of you may not have a whole experience with is our foreign trade zone. Pinellas County is the regional foreign trade zone operator. So we operate the foreign trade zone for all of our partnering communities. And this year we did a major expansion in the zone with our partners in Pasco County for HIT promotions, where we were able to help them facilitate a 500,000 square foot new facility. And they still have a facility here in Pinellas County, and we have their warehouse located in Pasco County. In order to do those kind of trade zone expansions, you have to have an area liaison that manages that whole process. And we have applied and have been that operator for the federal government for over the last 8 years. So we're excited about the expansion of the FTZ. And then to talk about our Small Business Enterprise Program, as you all developed this program about 5 years ago, we really have taken that program from a on-the-shelf good idea to really a tangible job-creating, small business, sustainable program, and moving it from $700,000 to over $38 million of contracts awarded to our businesses. And that will not happen, cannot happen, one, without the businesses, and two, without the staff here at Pinellas County looking for opportunities for our small business community. One thing that we're extremely proud of is we try to diversify our small business access and opportunities with government. So we don't just promote Pinellas County business opportunities. We have a program called APEX. It's a federal program where we help clients identify federal opportunities. Our office was just recognized, and in particular, one of our business managers, Yolanda Goodlow, was just recognized by the federal government at the national level for the service and participation in working with APEX. And we were able to award or assist our Pinellas County businesses with over $68 million of federal contracts. That's a really big deal for our defense industry, where we have over 800 defense contractors right here in Pinellas County. So we're really proud of that. And then I want to talk a little bit about the One Pinellas Business Council. The alliance, what we have done with that is Barry, thank you, because Barry really has spearheaded the alliance participation. And it's one thing to invite companies to participate, but to invite the CEOs, the executives of these organizations, including our college university system, really has created a roundtable format where we are really taking a good look at issues that are impacting our citizens as it relates to training and filling the talent pool with employees who have the right talents and are really positioned to move our businesses forward. And then last, I wanted to mention our strategic plan. Tuesday of this week, you all approved a transfer of funds for workforce services. As part of our strategic plan, we have 3 goal areas. One is business development, which includes our small and corporate business development and retention efforts. 2 is real estate and redevelopment. That's where we're running our redevelopment activities, our activities with the Star Center, our activities with the ESP. And then the 3rd goal was workforce and talent development. Having these dollars is going to help us really implement a very intentional workforce plan for our citizens and job seekers here in Pinellas County. So those are just some of the PCED activities. But I did want to give my colleague Greg, who is doing a phenomenal job with the Star Center. We all know that it's a beautiful asset that we have in the middle of the county. It's a little aged. It takes a lot of care to keep it moving. And Greg has been able to come along and really bring the right team to the table. And we have done some very intentional things with the Star Center that I wanted to highlight today. One of the things is you've heard that we are anticipating a shortfall. So we have taken the time to invest into a rental lease assessment to ensure that our leasing amounts are industry standards for like buildings. And we have found with that, yes, we do have an opportunity to increase our rental rates. We plan to do that as our new tenants come on board. We have been implementing our new rental rates. We have a plan, and we have been communicating with our current tenants about when their leases come up, how it's going to look. It's going to be a little different than traditionally they have been accustomed to. But I can tell you, and I'm going to take this point of privilege because I have Greg here, and a lot of times, a lot of his work go unnoticed. But I can tell you, in my conversations with all of the lease tenants, what they have said to me is the service that they're receiving as a tenant of the Star Center is one of the reasons why they say. So Greg is very responsive, his team is very responsive, and it takes a lot to maintain a 50-plus-year-old building. And we have deferred a lot of the CIP, but we can't continue to do that. So we look forward to looking at how to redevelop that asset for the county. It is 96 acres of opportunity, and we're going to take all 96 of those acres and make it a business park that we all can be proud of for the region. Barry, you want to add something? No? Okay. That's it for us, Chris. Thank you.
Okay, any questions, discussion? Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I agree with you. That 96 acres is an absolute golden opportunity for this county. So I look forward to getting into those discussions on the master redevelopment plan. So you're talking about increasing the lease rates as for new tenants and as the leases come due. What kind of percentage are we talking about there and going up?
Well, we have commissioned, Colliers is doing did Colliers do it? CBRE did the assessment. And so they have provided us a rate sheet. And so we're looking at the space and how much space they have and what their lease arrangements are in order to do that. But we are basing it on local industry and like facilities, because our facility, would you say, Greg, is like a C? Like a C-class facility right now. Okay. And so we're basing it on those rates.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And one other quick question. Any idea what the annual economic impact of the foreign train zone is?
No, I don't have that number right offhand, but I can get it.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Commissioner Eggers.
Yeah, first of all, I wanted to say kudos on the SBE program. I think that's great. We knew there was going to be a lot of construction coming up, and wanted to make sure that a lot of our business owners, that it spread, and that we got a lot of our smaller businesses engaged, which I think is just great. And I also want to take the opportunity to tip my hat to to the folks that you have working for you. Every time I have an encounter with them, they're just good people that know their business and have a passion for economic development, and I think that's just great. So I wanted to say that to you. So just on the Star Center, Commissioner Scott asked about the rental rate adjustments. Are there any opportunities there for an innovation center concept? Do they have, those little small incubator spaces that we have way over in, the St. Pete area? Is there a market for that type of thing? And again, you don't have to answer the question today. I'm just saying that, those small businesses need opportunities and places to start. So anyway, that was just a question. The CIP deferral makes me a little bit nervous because I'm not sure what that means on a project, on a building buildings that size. That can be big dollars. And a few years ago, we tried to put the property on the market for sale. And there were some issues, problems, challenges, whatever, and I don't want to get into all of it right now. But with the folks that we now have on board that kind of guide us on real estate issues, is that opportunity circling back or not? So just a question. So well, again, we don't have to get into all of it today, but comments would be great.
Well, thanks. I'll say to you, Commissioner, what we see the Star Center campus is 96 acres of opportunity for the county to own the property, but we see a big opportunity for us to do a P3 in the redevelopment of the Star Center, where we get a developer who is an expert in building business parks and industrial parks to create a world-class destination where we're able to not only leverage the industry talent that we have there, but to bring like industry to that one concentrated area and create more and better jobs for our citizens. So we are really looking at maintaining that asset for the county and redeveloping it through a P3 process.
But I think also, Commissioners, that P3 process could potentially give you an exit strategy. There's no reason for us to own that, in perpetuity. Some of the environmental issues, which, as you know, more than anyone, where industry's risk adverse to taking on that, that's what's being cleaned up. Some of those environmental issues are being addressed. The infrastructure that needs to be redone to where you can use it as a campus would be completed as part of this P3. And so I think as we get some of that information back, I think we can have that discussion about how do we implement this? How do we entice private development to manage private development, and then have an exit strategy, on the back end for us.
Microphone.
Really good developers would see opportunity for not only redevelopment itself, but also ownership and what to do with that going forward. And it has to be priced right, of course, because they're going to assume the risk going forward. But there are many out there that could potentially see development opportunities. And so I wanted to commend you for all the work you're doing down there, because when you got an older facility like that, sometimes you just got to keep it moving. Like some of us get older, it just, we need a little extra get up and go in the morning. But appreciate the hard work keeping that down. Thank you.
Commissioner Justice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It seems like a lifetime ago when we tried to sell that facility. Commissioner Eggers brought up innovation, and I wanted to know if we were going to get a presentation at some point this year, like an ARC update on where they are. I read the article about some of the companies coming in from around the country, but if we could get an update at some point about how they are on space and usage and tenants or, clients or whatever.
Absolutely, Commissioner. I'll work with Jill to get it on the agenda, but I think that's an excellent idea. So that we can all see the investment that's being made and the innovation that's happening right here in our backyard. That's an excellent idea, and we'll welcome that opportunity, and we'll bring our operator in to also be part of that discussion.
Commissioners, before that, though, I have a meeting that they're just scheduling with Cynthia to discuss the Innovation Center and some of the issues and startup, et cetera, and stuff. I want to go back to the original intent, okay, and the operators' requirements. And so I just want you to be aware that there's a few things that I need to address, when we bring it in here.
So I understand.
Okay, so.
Commissioner Long.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I was struck by Commissioner Scott's question with regard to the impact of foreign trade in our area or region. And correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Johnson, but I seem to recall the CEO of Virgin Air talking about the studies that they had done and what that caused them to bring their airline to Tampa Bay. It was a knock your socks off kind of number, as I recall. And the woman from JP Morgan Chase spoke to us as well about the economic impacts of foreign business with the Tampa Bay region specifically. So it made me so proud to hear that, because I thought, wow, we are really making an impact around the world if these kind of numbers are real. So I just wanted to remind you of that so that you had an opportunity to track down those numbers.
Yes, Commissioner. I'll make sure that when we report back on the FTZ impact, we'll include some of that information. We all are very excited about what's happening with Global Tampa Bay, our tri-partnership that really focuses on international business development. And it is very busy right now because we are an international destination. We've just had a major local expansion with one of our largest electrical manufacturers who have insourced, brought back some manufacturing that's going to create hundreds and hundreds of opportunities for our citizens, and a lot of that has to do with our international engagement. So yes, ma'am, I'll make sure I bring it back.
Any other questions, comments? Commissioner Eggers?
On the foreign trade zone, thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Law and Commissioner Scott. But as it relates to lands that are available for that kind of expansion, under this obligation or this role that we play, do we have to identify lands within our county that are available for things like a 500 square foot new facility? Is that part of being that administrator, or is that just something that?
Yes, we are the designee to identify zones that you can have that kind of opportunity for a business. So we do, and we have identified all of the FTZs in the region. And then with those identification of the zones, we work with companies to expand into those areas. So yes.
Is that mostly industrial lands?
Yes, mostly.
I think
Manufacturing.
I think that's something we have to continue to let our legislative delegation be aware of, is in addition to preserving industrial lands, it's important to have it for this as well. I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
It's a multitude of reasons, but that's an area, especially that was the lands that were identified under the Teal study. I think those are really super critical areas that need to be preserved, and for a multitude of reasons that are some of the ones you touched on today. So, thank you.
Any
Thank
other
you, Madam Chair.
additional
That's all I have.
comments or questions? Okay, thank you so much, Cynthia. Good to see you. You always have a great report.
Thank you all.
Next, we're going to move on to safety and emergency services.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So John Ondrovic is finding his way next to me here. He has presented to you earlier on Public Works and has the Sheriff's Office, so he has some big departments that he keeps an eye on for us. Also at the department table is Jim Fogarty, Director, you all know, and Jody Seschler, the Division Director of Financial Services, both good partners with OMB, so I appreciate it. So John, if you're ready, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Commissioners. We're going to start on the bottom of page 2 and page 3. You'll see a detailed breakout of the cost reductions. And just to summarize, the department was able to realize a $3 million cost savings in FY25, a $1.3 million cost savings in 24, and a $2 million cost savings in 23. On those pages, you can see the breakout of those. Now on page 4, we're going to go to topics of discussion. The department is exploring potential efficiencies that can be generated through consolidation or co-location of secondary public safety answering points over the next 3 years, beginning after the CAD is completed, for operational effectiveness and for financial benefit. They're also looking at pilot testing for alternative response models for the nurse triage lines, behavioral mental health consultations via telemedicine, and for matching callers' needs with response models. There are expected cost increases associated with the existing PARS service levels due to decreasing work week within the industry, and this is known as the Shift D phenomenon. They're also looking at how marine response beach safety on the Gulf beaches and the barrier islands is handled along the Gulf Coast. They want to take a look at maintaining the EMS revenues to keep in front of the healthcare reimbursement changes occurring in the ambulance industry. And they're exploring potential solutions to address the small agency challenges. And this has to deal with lateral transfers, recruitment, lack of career progress for the departments. And then for the computer-aided design dispatch, the CAD, there was a decision to delay the timeline of completion between Hexagon and Prime, and this was due to the lack of experience with cloud-based software. The projected CAD go-live date now is the second quarter of 2025. Now we're going to jump ahead to the addendum that was added to your packet. It's a one-page document, and we're going to discuss the fire district millages. There are 5 fire districts remaining the same for FY24, and seven district millages with a rollback for 25. That's the 7 include the City of Clearwater, Largo, Safety, Harbor have greater than estimate rollbacks. Gandy is at a full rollback, and Pinellas Park, Topper Springs, and Tierra Verde are partial rollbacks. Onto the EMS fund portion. The recommendation of a reduction to the millage rate. The current millage rate for the EMS fund is 0.8418 mils, and the department is recommending that they could go back to a 0.8050. And just a fair warning, this is subject to change with the July 1st numbers. There are some first responder assessment recommended enhancements. The first one is Palm Harbor. They're requesting request by the district to add a 24/7 position, implement the Rescue 65 Lieutenant. This is a new position and a vehicle is needed. Next one is Seminole. The request by the city to evaluate EMS coverage and station, request by the city to evaluate EMS coverage in consideration of call volume and response times at stations 29 and 30 with the addition of the Bay Pines Fire Station. This is a request, or a mid-year request of $150,000 for FY25 with a capital request of $350,000. And then the St. Pete Beach, request by the city to implement Gulf Beach Rescue Lieutenants. This is a new position, and also $300,000 for a vehicle. I'm sorry, $300,000 is for the total. It's $150 for the FY25 request, and then a capital of $75 for the vehicle. There are a couple of potential pilots being requested. And it's using ambulance user fees to pilot a variable deployed multi-district peak load driven transport unit, not statistically deployed from a fire station, but dynamically deployed based on call load and ambulance availability. And there's 2 of these. These are based off of City of Clearwater is asking for $125,000 for FY25 with a capital request of $350,000. And Pinellas Suncoast, again, $150,000 for FY25 with a capital of $350,000. Now, the EMS fund can't afford these enhancements with a millage rate reduction and still maintain the 25% fund balance as required by board policy through the forecasted period. Now we're going to return to the bottom of page 4 of the main document for the budget drivers.
Well, before we get off that, John, real quick, this is probably one of the biggest areas we deal with all these different levies. All of these follow our data-driven focus group standards, okay? So we're still adhering to those standards. So, you know, how we've had requests, well, I need this, I need that. These fall within the ranges for what triggers an enhanced, you know, position or seat and things like that. And so they all comply within that. So just, I call that out only because there's other requests out there, so. Go ahead.
Continue on the bottom of page 4.
Just a second. Commissioner Justice has a question.
Thank you. Just to that point, so I heard it clear, the proposed rollback rates on those 7 districts, if they do that, we cannot afford the decision?
We can.
Recommended, or we can?
We can.
Okay, I want to make sure I got that word right.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah, that one T is a big.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
These are we wouldn't put the rollback rate without the recommendations, and the reason that's important is, again, it ties back to the data-driven focus group reviewing these, making sure and that's all the fire chiefs meeting those standards that we've established for when do we trigger changes, and those all fall within that. And Jim will speak to this in greater detail than what John and I will speak to.
And then just Jim, when you get to your point, if you could talk about the Bay Pines issue in there. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, now we're going to continue on the bottom of page 4 and onto page 5 for the budget drivers. The current FY25 department budget is increasing $73.5 million. Safety Emergency Services consists of 4 funds. You have the General Fund, the Emergency Medical Services Fund, the Intergovernmental Radio Communications Fund, and the Emergency Communications E911 System Fund. Revenues are increasing $40.3 million, and this is due to a 9.1% increase to the ad valorem. That's about $8.6 million at the current millage rate. Interest revenues are increasing approximately $2.4 million. Ambulance fees are increasing $13.7 million, and budgeted PEMT, which is the Public Emergency Medical Transportation revenues, are increasing $14.8 million. Department reserves are increasing $43.8 million. For the EMS fund, resolution states that the reserve level will be at or above 25% of the total expenditures. The EMS fund right now with this budget has reserves of 34.8 of total expenditures for a total of $112 million. The increase in reserves is driven by this. It's 22.9 million is an increase to the FY24 actual beginning fund balance over what was budgeted. And the drivers for this was the FY23 ambulance collections and the PEMT revenues exceeded budgets and delays of capital purchases due to delays in supply chains. There was a $14.8 million increase for the FY24, and this is driven mostly by the PEMT of $10.7 million over budget and the ambulance fees. And then with the increase in the millage that we have right now, which is at the full millage rate, it's about $6.9 million additional. Personal services are increasing only $37,300, and this is due to hiring at lower rates for employees that are going out. And we also include the 3% salary adjustment on the midpoint for all employees and the FRS adjustments. Their FTEs remain flat at 199 FTEs. Operating expenses increased $20.2 million, and this is driven by the ambulance contract increase of $3.8 million and the ambulance billing increases of $7.7 million. Capital outlay is decreasing $1.9 million due to one-time capital purchases of machinery and equipment in FY24. The department has one decision package. It's the radio interference locators, and this is for interference locators that proactively detect spectrum anomalies on the radio system that cause a rise in the noise floor and or emittent spikes at the tower sites leading to interference. It's a general fund request of one time of $196,935, and then there's follow-up maintenance costs of year 2, year 3, and year 4 that range between $25,000 and $40,000. And the county administrator has preliminarily recommended approval of this package for the FY25 budget. And lastly, we have the summary of proposed changes to the user fees, and this is going to be on page 6. And the increase in fees is to keep pace with the rising medical costs and coincide with the increased costs of the services provided. And then membership fee increases is an effort to keep the membership program actuarially sound. And with this, I'll turn it over to Chris for the CIP section.
So once again, Commissioners, there are a few capital projects here in Safety and Emergency Services. You'll see the first 4 of them are all associated with the radio system that we have. They're all on track as they should be. Everything is right. And then the last 3 are with our partners out there, first responder partners, and you can see where those are. We actually just made some changes. You saw the Reddington Beach one on this last agenda back on Tuesday. So you can read the rest of it, but all in front of you. And I'll turn it over to Jim Fogarty now for accomplishments, work plan, and performance measures.
Good morning. Thanks, John. I'm impressed that you were able to read some of those technical things. Good job. Thank you, Commissioners. Jim Fogarty, Bureau Director. Sitting next to me is Jody Seschler, Director of Financial Services. Thank you very much. And please bear with me. Describing the accomplishments of such a large agency, we've got 199 employees, and we represent 2,000 emergency responders that are out in the field. To do that in 10 minutes is impossible. And so I'm going to have to do that by example, the accomplishments. But on page 12 to 19, you'll see a listing of the 199 employees that work for Safety and Emergency Services. And to a T, I could describe examples with each employee, maybe with the exception of some of the new folks that we hired, examples of excellent public service that they have done this last year. For example, you'll see the name of Candy McKee Stripe. Candy works over in support services, but she was a telecommunicator. And she had an idea with a hallway conversation and a passion for helping the public, rolled out a program in conjunction with our growth management known as Health Buddies. It was a referral program, and the referral program since January has referred hundreds of medically isolated people to that program. And I'll quote from an email that one of those referrals sent to Candy just May 14th of this year. And this is a quote from the patient. "My battle with COVID-19, along with my morbid obesity, left me in dire straits. I was referred to Health Buddy by EMS, which has given me hope and a renewed chance at a healthier future. Although we have never met, I want to thank you for saving my life." Or I could mention any of them, but I'll mention Cassandra Helm. You'll see her name there. She works for Jody. She was dealing with a client that was being denied health care coverage. Time and time again, hospital denied her, the labs denied her, and even coverage for her ambulance service was denied. And she took it upon herself, Cassandra, to work with the client and the third-party payers, explaining how it actually was their responsibility to cover that ambulance bill, and she saved that person hundreds and hundreds of hours of grief and thousands of dollars in fees that she thought she was going to have to pay. And I could go on and on and on, but I won't. I mention those to remind everyone that emergency service is about people. It's about programs and it's about money, but it's about people. And the people that we deal with each and every day. I know this board, and I know their penchant for supporting public safety services, and I want to thank you for that. Our strategy, as I go into our accomplishments, generally is like this. We utilize our strong partnerships. We utilize data to make data-informed decisions, and we act. My department is known for acting. So let me go by division, what we've done. And starting with 911, under the leadership of Judith Wasinski-Price. She can't be here today, but under her leadership, and with the support of our county administrator and our assistant county administrator and our budget director and this board, I can report today that our 911 system leads the state and perhaps the country in our 90-second call answer time. If you dial 911 today, if you called it this morning, 96% of the time that call will be answered in 10 seconds or less. Within the next 15 seconds, the address will be verified, and within 45 seconds, paramedics will be dispatched to that call if it's an EMS type of a call. It's a little longer for the law enforcement community, but it's still within 60 seconds. Our employee turnover at 911 has improved by 26% over this time last year. For career-minded employees, people that have been with us 2 years or longer, our turnover is less than 1%. For those that are just starting with us, you put them into the equation, our total turnover is at 17% right now. That's unheard of in the 911 industry. And I wanted to thank, Barry mentioned the wage package that we put forth last year. That in part is part of it, but a lot of the changes that we did in our system are also part of it. We've dramatically improved our training process with the opening of our simulation lab. That lab has the exact same computers and the applications and networks. It actually mimics what they'll be expected to do, even with their shift schedule. They report to work at the training for 6 o'clock in the morning. And it's so impressive that other agencies, including the sheriff, has asked to borrow that training lab so they can conduct some of their training. So I want to thank you for some of that, and it's really Judith's doing. She was able to absorb all of the call-taking functions for the Pinellas County, for the Pinellas Park Police Department when they sunsetted their secondary PSAP in May of this year. She did so without a blip and without one increase in FTE. And that not only improved the service for the citizens, meaning they didn't have to repeat their information twice. The call was not transferred over to Pinellas Park PD. It was handled and dispatched within 60 seconds. Before the transfer even occurred, the dispatchings were occurring. And then a special shout out to Judith, because she is directly responsible for nearly, I'll say millions and millions of dollars, and that's not exaggerating, for acquiring state grants. 20 times what we pay her, she's returned back to us with state grants from the E911 fund. I want to turn over to support services. And I give a shout out to Deputy Director Dave here. Again, he's watching the shop right now. But I want to give him a shout out and his team. Often we think of support services as, oh yeah, they're behind the scene. It's sort of like an administrative function, but it is not. They've expanded the partnerships we have. The partnership with Workforce Relations, Rodney, Marion, and Amanda are on Dave's speed dial. And he's assuring that we not only hire the right people, because that's so key to the success of an organization. We hire the right people, but we also support the people that decide to call Safety and Emergency Services home. We've expanded the partnership we began with BTS back in 2021 when Jeff Rohr and I sat and created a service level agreement. We've expanded that partnership that helps create the technology that'll bring Pinellas County into the next decade. And we are really proud of that service level agreement. Right now, we're holding vendors accountable for their reliability, the costs that they charge the county on their networks, their critical applications. And many of these large companies are not used to being held accountable. And I would quote their names and you would know those names, but they're not used to any pushback from county government. Our Motorola radio system has a 6 Sigma reliability standard. It's up almost all the time. Support services shut down an illegal BDA operation. You saw the decision package for the monitoring system. They were able to shut down a BDA operation. It was a company that sold Publix a bill of goods, thinking that company needed to install BDAs in all of their stores. They did not. And we shut it down because it was interfering with the noise floor of our radio system, saving Publix here in Pinellas County hundreds of thousands of dollars in unnecessary BDAs. I suspect it's probably true statewide with Publix. So I want to give a special thanks out. Then financial services, Jody's sitting right next to me. She's shy, and she never wants to be recognized. But you realize that under her leadership, our financial services and ambulance billing produced $93 million in revenues this past year. Now, you recognize that team as a team of the quarter back in February. But let me remind you, 2 years ago, she asked Lourdes and Barry and Chris, she asked for an FTE. She says, listen, I think I can do better. And they trusted her. Am I right? You trusted her. And I'm here to report today, right now, she's increased the net revenue per ambulance claim by 32%. And this is not by strong-arm collection tactics. Her model is being a patient advocate towards these third-party payers and making the insurance companies pay the bills they're supposed to pay in the first place. Her team has the highest collection rate and lowest cost per collection of any EMS system in the United States. She's got successful oversight of a series of complex funds and budgets. As a matter of fact, if you look on page 40 to 45 of your handout, you'll see examples of her team's organizational skills and presentation skills. She's taken a very complex budget, created a series of infographics that are so simple to understand that even I can understand them. And that's to her credit. But she also steps up at a moment's notice when any county department is challenged. There was a time earlier this year when a county department, not even under the county administrator's authority, was challenged with posting of revenues because of some employee vacancies. And she sent a team of her 2 best posters over there, and within 2.5 weeks was able to completely clear the backlog of that department. So I want to give a special shout out. She's often behind the scenes. And she, too, also managed to secure a $1.75 million federal COPS grant to help offset the cost of the Prime CAD system, which is so expensive but so necessary in the system. So thanks, Jody. I know you asked me not to say that. And then finally, I want to end by recognizing our fire and EMS administration. Under Craig Hare's leadership, he's on a well-deserved vacation right now. But remember, our EMS system is used by 25% of our population every year. That's incredible. 20% of our population finds themselves in the back of an ambulance every year. We handled 677 calls a day. Matter of fact, there'll be 29 people that use our EMS system while I'm speaking here during this presentation. And he's managed, this is Craig's leadership, that team has managed to solicit a new Office of the Medical Director contract, renegotiate a competitive ambulance contract. It's a very expensive, very important contract. You'll see that contract probably before the board sometime in July. We've adopted a utilization review process, provided funds to many of our partner agencies, $1.5 million to the St. Pete College to rebuild their fire training center, $3 million to Pinellas Suncoast to help rebuild their Oak Coast Fire Station, $1.5 million to help pay for a ladder truck, $700,000 to Palm Harbor Fire Department when someone crashed Squad 65 and the responsible party's insurance couldn't replace that vehicle. We stepped up to the plate with Barry's guidance and helped cover that uncovered cost. So I want to recognize those folks for what they do behind the scenes in providing emergency services. We have a lot to do. We've done a lot, but we have a lot to do. I'm not going to get into our work plan because we just don't really have the time. I don't want to leave time for questions. But we have some things I want to put on your radar screen, broad concepts. One, for our work plan, we want to prove some conceptual, more efficient and effective ways to provide service. I won't get into what they are, but I will if you ask me. I want to reduce the growth rate of system costs. Continue to build out and update the technology platform, including the applications. We're going to focus on quality this year. We've already begun that. And then finally, financial planning. And the financial planning I'll mention, and Barry already mentioned this, includes a look at the state E911 fund, because historically that fund, if you went back 20 years ago, provided 100% of the costs associated with 911 systems. Today, it provides less than 40% of the cost of the system. And so you, as a state, the state of Florida's cost is the 4th lowest in the United States. But that's good. You don't want to overcharge taxpayers, but it's bad because they've transitioned that cost to the local government. And so that hits your general fund to the tune of about $8 million a year. And so I think looking at that, the legislation that had constrained the use of that fund has been changed. And Matt Spohr and I have a meeting to kind of talk through that and what that might look like. With that, I'll stop there and end my presentation to entertain questions.
Before we get to Commissioner questions, the one thing I wanted to highlight is, and it was noted in the other sheet, is these pilot programs. We really have to look at the way we deploy resources. Not everything has to come out of a fixed station. You see Sunstar, they're parked at a gas station. They're not just parked at that gas station, they're parked strategically because they know their call volumes and they know where that's coming from. And so them employing other types and options, we've got to be open to that. And so that's one of the way that they can manage to slow the system cost increases. So I'll stop.
Okay, any questions, conversation? Big department, big budget. Commissioner Eggers.
Well, I don't know where to begin. First of all, thank you for, we could probably spend an hour and probably should at some point to dive into all of the things that you guys are doing and all the improvements that you've made and how you ultimately bring services to our residents. I mean, the comment that you made about 25% of our residents are going to use EMS services this year, that is incredible. And to your efforts to try to help folks with that billing procedure, I mean, it's just, it's bad enough that you're going through that kind of thing, whatever that health call is. But then to have to deal with some of the stuff that's out there, they need professionals to guide them. So thank you for recognizing her and a lot of the efforts that she makes. I really don't have any specific questions, but I really would like to spend more time, not critiquing, but understanding all of these flows. I mean, some of the things that you were talking about, I was reading it ahead of time, not following it too well, only because there's so much. And so I'd like to have some more time with this at some point to kind of each of the departments, each of the groups and what they're doing. So thank you.
Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Jim, and thank you for everything you do. I don't know how you keep track of all the moving pieces. It's a very, very big department with a lot of moving pieces to it. And this may be more of a question for Chris, I'm not sure, but the increase in fees, is that intended to just be kind of revenue neutral, meaning that just covers the additional cost that we're seeing, or is that increasing any revenue? Or?
Sure. Am I on? You're live. It's intended to cover the increased cost of the ambulance program.
Okay, because, yeah, I see the ambulance programs going up about pretty close to 19%, and you guys have obviously seen those numbers because of the RFP, so I assume you're comfortable with what those numbers are.
Jody, how do we compare to other, like other ambulance, like Pasco County, what's the ambulance charges up there?
They're up to,
Almost
I
double
believe,
ours.
1,400. And-
1,400?
Right, and we're at about 900.
Okay, that's a
So
good
we're-
comparison.
We're $70 below the average of our neighboring counties.
Okay, great. And then last question, the 25% reserve policy, is that industry kind of standard? How do we compare with other counties around us or other places in the state?
Pinellas County is it's a unique system, not a very unique system, but it's a system that was designed a long time ago to try to stabilize the costs going up and down and right and left. And so that was decided by this board based on resolution many years ago to try to stabilize the costs. So there's really not a system that I can quote that has sort of here's a standard. But it, over time, has served us well. For instance, in the 2006, 2008 economic downturn, the ability to draw down those reserves really costs and avoided a lot of shutdown, slow down layoffs. And I think the benefit of having a reserve level at 25%, it allows you to weather the storm. At one point, the user fees for ambulance weren't sufficient to cover the ambulance fees, and so we were able to buffer that. And then there are other points where it's the reverse. So I think the high level at 25%, you could argue too much, but you can argue that over the last 35 years, it really has served to stabilize the system, which I think is very well recognized internationally.
How, what's the most that we've ever drawn it down in terms of if we ever got it down to like 50% or any idea on that?
We could get you that exact figure.
Okay.
But I can tell you it was probably during the economic downturn in 2008.
Okay.
And before it was drawn down below a certain amount, there were units that were, people will tell you that, a fire unit in Fire Department A was no longer funded. So that was the cost of not having sufficient reserves.
Right, okay. And then lastly, on the decision package, can you just kind of explain that in kind of layman's terms, what that is?
The bidirectional amplifier monitoring system works on top of a radio system, and it identifies through triangulation the location of a device that has not been authorized to auto-transmit on a public safety system. And it can do that. Right now, technology allows these companies to actually turn them on. They're not supposed to, and we report them to the FCC when they do that. But when they turn them on, for instance, it was one that was turned on right outside of St. Anthony's Hospital and interfered with the communications with Bayfront Medical Center and St. Anthony's and St. Pete Police Department until we could get it shut down. This system helps triangulate where that signal is coming from quickly so we can take action almost immediately.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you.
Commissioner Justice.
Thank you. Just wanted to follow up on the City of Seminole's request about Bay Pines, and if you give us a status report of that.
I met with the fire chief just a little while ago. They've got a new fire chief. They're expected to begin construction and then complete the fire station, I think sometime within fiscal year 2025. It's located at the piece of property that they had dedicated for that, not on the Bay Pines campus due to some federal issues. And then when that station opens up, they plan to redeploy one of the existing units that's at their Station 29 down to that location and then reshuffle the deck. We're working with them. We've done some predictive modeling on what that might look like. We're adding a seat to Seminole because as it stands right now, Station 29, which is the district that serves that Bay Pines area, is very, very, very busy. They've got 3 units and all 3 units are busy. So I expect that station will open up sometime in 2025, maybe 2026. But, I think they're working with a contractor to turn dirt.
Any other questions, discussion? No. So you've got topics for discussion, and you touched on some of them, but you didn't really go into the D-shift phenomenon and what our plan is. Are we preparing? Is there something in this budget that's preparing for that? Or is that just something that is on our radar because next year could impact us or mid-year might impact us? And then you also brought up the beach safety, Gulf Beaches, Barrier Island, same questions.
So Commissioner, this is an issue that'll affect all of us. When I say us, I mean county, city, independent fire districts. We really don't have firefighters. We don't hire firefighters. So their salary and how much they work really indirectly affects us because we pay a certain proportion of that. I don't have any good answers for that. Only thing I can tell you that this has occurred already on the West Coast, California, and the state of Oregon, the state of Washington. Already, generally the concept is right now is a firefighter generally works a 56-hour work week, or sometimes it's a 53-hour work week. And as these systems get busier, it's really unreliable. You can't really expect someone to stay up all night every day working 56 hours. So the tendency is for these unions and the labor groups to say, hey, we don't necessarily want more money, we want more time off, because we just can't be up all night and do this. And so that's the D shift. They're saying we want to reduce our work week. East Lake Fire, for instance, is reducing their work week down to 48 hours. As it gets reduced down, and you can't blame them, they're working like crazy, you still need to fill those seats, assuming a par level of service. And so to answer your question, I don't have a good solution. There's probably multiple solutions. One solution is piloting different ways to do it. Do you need the same number of people at 2 o'clock in the morning as you need at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? Another way, perhaps, is changing the legislation associated with reciprocity. So like they've done in the law enforcement community, they've encouraged law enforcement officers from out of state to come here. We could encourage firefighters from out of state to come here. Right now, it's somewhat bureaucratic to get a certification transfer from, say, the state of Ohio into the state of Florida. So looking at the reciprocity, looking at the pipeline for training and experiencing firefighters. So I don't have an answer. We are looking at that, but it affects all of us. It affects cities and their municipal budget, and it affects the EMS system. So I don't have a long.
Commissioners, we pay seats, okay? We pay for seats out in the fire department, okay? Be it an independent fire agency or a city. So they're negotiating those agreements, not us. So, but we're going to pay the proportionate amount for the seats that we have. The biggest impact is going to be on those entities themselves, because they're going to have the majority of the staff, right? But then those seats that we fund, we're going to pay, that'll show up in our funds based upon that cost of providing that service. So that's where it impacts us. Now, I will tell you, Jim and actually specifically Craig Hare has been looking at and talking with the fire chiefs about how do we train? How do we build up the capacity? And Commissioner Peters raised this to us, also. How do we address that capacity? So that's going to be a challenge for them that they need to come together and talk about how do they do that. One of the phenomenons that they, had is like right now you hire police and then you send them off to the academy. Well, firefighters, we don't typically do that. We don't pay for that training. So I think they're gonna have to come up with that, and there's gonna be a cost impact of those. But as a group, they're gonna have to work to try to solve and create options for how to fill that. Because if you go to that, if you work less, well, then you're going to need more people. It's a 24/7. So it's like, we always get that. People say, well, give us additional time off. Yeah, but in all of our 24-hour operations, that means additional people for coverage, And so there's a cost to that. And that would have a real impact on cost depending upon how those contracts are structured.
Yeah, and a lot of what's driving that is the overtime. These guys are working a ton of overtime. And that's why there's that demand for more time off. It's not that they want to work less. It's they're really not working 53 hours a week. They're really working more like 70. And so if every department had to add a shift, there's going to be a huge shortage of firefighters. There will not be enough firefighters to add another shift to every department. So yeah, I don't know what the solution is, but I'm glad you're looking at it. It's on the radar. It's a talking point, but we didn't talk about it. And I don't know how much everybody knows or understands about how firefighting shifts works, but that would be a huge problem. And and again, when there's shortages of EMS, and that's why I thought maybe the lifeguard thing, because if a fire department managed the lifeguards, they can have them trained as EMTs. And that, at least we'd have EMTs, maybe not firefighters, but there could be that kind of promotion to get more people into the fire service department. And so that's why I keep bringing that up. So as long as it was a talking point, I thought I would go ahead and do some talking on it. And then you also brought up the beaches. Now, I know we've got drownings on the beach, so I don't know what this means. Does this mean that our fire departments are adding more water things? What does this mean, this talking point?
Well, in this forum, we likely don't have time, but in a general sense, marine rescue is considered a function of rescue, not necessarily EMS. Right? EMS is rescue, but if you're having a heart attack in the water, it's an EMS call. So when you look at marine response as a rescue function instead of a medical function, you can compare it to some of our other specialty teams like the hazardous material team or the technical rescue team, right? And the county has sort of created an approach to those specialty situations from rescue where everybody can't have a hazmat team, and so we only have a few and they become specialized, right? The hazardous material team in this county responds to about 96 hazardous material incidents a year. The technical rescue team in this county responds to about 46 technical rescue. We have 546 marine responses in this county each and every in 2023. When a marine response occurs, for instance, any fire chief will tell you this, it usually happens along the beach communities. Those are smaller departments, smaller fire stations. It typically takes 3 fire stations to launch a marine response because of the people involved launching boats. And so the result of that is not only the marine response, but those 3 districts, which typically have ALS coverage on those same units, go without ALS coverage during that hour and a half, 2 hours of a marine response. So the reason it's a talking point is so we can talk intelligently about, is there a better approach to doing this? Right now, they're doing the best they can. They're launching boats. They're, trying to craft sort of a makeshift marine response. But the talking point was perhaps it needs to be a more comprehensive discussion about how it all works in Pinnacle. Because right now, 546, probably next year will be 600. That's not to say, how many of those 600 are drowning patients and how many of those folks are hit by props. So they do become EMS patients, but that was the purpose of the talking point.
Okay. And I know my son's responded to cars going in off of Gandy Boulevard or off of 60. They end up into Tampa Bay, and so it's not it's drowning, but it's cars that go into the water and stuff like that. So it's dive teams, it's all kinds of things.
Commissioner, your point is exactly right, and I want to point out this board authorized what's known as a wet response team out of the EMS fund, right? That decision this board made probably 5-6 years ago. I wasn't part of that decision.
It was before me.
It was
So it's
directly
longer than
responsible
6
for
years
at
ago.
least 2 lives saved over the last 2 months. One in St. Petersburg with a car in the water, and I think one in Clearwater where a car goes in the water, they have the equipment to do the best they can to try to get that person out of it. That decision saved at least 2 lives over the last 2 months.
Okay. So thank you for, I saw him as talking points, so I made him talking points. So any other questions, conversations? And so I assume we're going to be hearing more in the future on both of those?
I believe that would be a correct assumption.
Okay, great. Any other questions, conversations? All right, thanks so much, Jim. Fascinating. Okay. So we have one more item left to go. It's the county commissioner's budget. And I did send out a memo, and this is about a subject that's been brought up numerous times since I've been here in the almost 6 years. So I'm going to bring it up one more time for conversation. And I don't know, Chris, you're going to start us off though, right?
I can do that, Commissioner. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm going to run through the Board of County Commissioners page just like I normally would for any other department. I don't have anyone to introduce because I'm your budget analyst. I do have 2 folks to thank, though. Brian Ulbrich, our ICMA fellow, helped me greatly on this year, and Audrey Abels also helped me greatly on it. So I want to thank them. But I'll go through this very, very quickly. There's not much for me to say. So the way the budget is built right now is each district office budget has remained flat. We left it at the same amount in fiscal year 25 as in 24, and the mayor's council membership has remained flat as well. These are efficiencies that the board has built into the 25 budget. Last year, we went ahead and captured the efficiency of taking out the $15,000 of the community events fund, and so that was a savings in fiscal year 24. Just a couple of topics of discussion. We've already talked about it, or will talk about it. The commissioner's decision packages, office budgets remaining flat, and state-determined salaries for commissioners yourselves. I don't have a raise built in for you commissioners at the moment, but we will. We're going to get a state-declared amount for each of you, and we will build that in. So with that said, let me go to the second page. There's one or two other things on that page, and that is just the position count stays flat at 15. Right now, the budget is built just like every other department, 3% on the midpoint, subject to change, and operating expenses are increasing by $16,440, and that's just the cycle of replacing computers as we go. And with that, I've completed my portion of the presentation.
Okay, so I've got kind of, I sent out this memo to you so you have it. And it was kind of brief, but then there were attachments that go into some more detail. And so the thought is, if you like transparency and accountability, and I think you all might like this concept, okay? And moving the executive assistant role to the county administrative office, it originally was there, and then we brought it into our offices. And we've talked about this, and I know Janet mentioned it last year, about moving it into Barry's office again. And it's been brought up, I think, twice since we've been here. So if we were to move the executive assistant role to the county admin office, it would put those functions back there. And, you know, our meetings really are a function of Barry's office. And so a lot of what that person does really is associated with these meetings and what is kind of admin's responsibility. The other component was to isolate the district budgets as our own budget. So for those of us that were in the legislature, it's the same thing. You got your own budget. Right now we have this shared budget, and it gets confusing. So if we had our own budget, what we're sharing now is, and I have notes, but I'm not going to read them. I'm going to try and summarize and then have to go back with your questions. But we lease a great big copier, but if we went to individual budgets, we could eliminate that lease. Everybody would have their own printers. We don't need fax machines anymore. Everybody would be able to do scanning and do their own printing without having to spend money on that leased copier. I guess I am going to have to go back to my notes. So also, and when I was looking at the roles of that person to justify having that person there, and I'd be happy to send that all to you, but a lot of it was just creating things for that person to do. But I have to sign off on so many things with budget, and I don't necessarily think that should be the chair's function. I think you each have your own budget and you operate on your own budget. So if you want a new computer, it's in your budget, you get your new computer. You don't necessarily have to come to the chair's office. If you have to do the shared copying and you leave something on there and it might be something private you don't want everyone to see, but it was left on the copier, that's eliminated because it's strictly in your office. And so it takes everything that's shared right now, and there's mistakes. So if there's a mistake in somebody's budget, I have to sign off on it. Well, it's really not the chair's business. It's really your business. And so you and the budget department take care of those budget items. And you eliminate the chair kind of meddling in those parts of that budget. And so everybody has a budget, and then however you choose to pay your legislative aid is part of your budget. If you decide that they need a big raise, it's part of your budget. So you can decide and control how you're going to spend your money based on your budget. It's very transparent. If anyone wants to know how you're spending your money, right now, because there's shared stuff, it takes all the shared out, and it keeps you completely transparent on what you have been allocated and how you spend it, versus some stuff that's muddied. And I don't necessarily think that we need, like I said, the shared stuff. I think everybody has their own budget. They operate under their budget, and there's no mix-up. There's no me finding out that somebody went over their budget. That's not my, don't care. They went over their budget. They can deal with it the way they need to deal with it. But I shouldn't have to be getting involved in that as a chair, or anybody else that's the chair. So I suppose I should have stayed on task and read this, but it's a lot to read. So I I think there's two things to talk about, is if we move that person, and I really got the feeling the last time we talked about this, there were, I think, two people that felt that that person, and we've had a hard time keeping people here, and Jamie's been outstanding, and she's great, and we love her, and it's not really about the person, it's the position. And so we've had a difficult time keeping that position filled. Every year having a new boss, I think, is difficult for that person in that position. And, it's kind of an odd thing. And I think the reason that we kept that person there was boards and committees, which I believe is an administrative function, not legislative function. And so what I'm trying to separate is administrative function versus legislative function. And so that person, I think, the vast majority of people wanted that person was there because you wanted somebody at the reception desk. Well, so far, since I've been the chair, we've had 4 people come to the reception desk that needed to be buzzed in. 4. And so I just feel that moving that FTE, and everybody has a phone, everybody has the ability to let somebody in, but 4 people. So if the reason we were keeping her there was for 4 people to get buzzed in, that's not a good use of taxpayer money. But if we move her into the administrative section, we take that FTE out of the legislative budget and we put it into the administrative budget. And I can go through every function that that person has to do, and I promise you, and I can tell you where it goes and how it goes, and I promise you, if you go through it, it makes sense. And I know Janet was advocating for this last year. She and I talked about it numerous times. She's brought it up when we talked about it in this meetings. And for those of you that haven't been chairman yet, you kind of don't know, and I didn't know it when we were talking about it before because I hadn't done it before. But when you take a look at each function, so the chair's office needs a staff person for support. Well, what we've done is if we lose that person, the vice chair kind of steps in and helps out. And so I think the biggest concern, it's not boards and committees, I think boards and committees goes to administration. I think the biggest concern would be CATS, CATS items. And I've always been a strong advocate that and I've done this, and I'm sure all of you have done this too, because I have a specific district, if a CATS item comes from my district, I answer it. Even if it goes to all 6 of you, all 7 of us, I answer it because those are my constituents. That's my district, those are my constituents. So even if all 7 of us get it, I think each individual district, just like when you were in the legislature, because many of us were, you wanted to take care of your constituents. And so when I was in the legislature, somebody else's, Commissioner Latvella's people reached out to me, I would say, well, that's really great, but I want to put you in contact with your representative, right? And so when a CATS item comes in, I think that it should go to each district, that they should be the one to respond to each one of those on where that's located. And we know because they put in there who it goes to. And then for the at-large, many of you respond anyways. I know Brian responds to everybody. And so if you still want to respond, you certainly can respond. And that way the people know that we're sensitive to what their issues are. So to me, out of all of the things, it was that one was the big issue.
Before we get off of that, Commissioner Peters, before we get off of that item, on this CATS item, I mean, this is kind of a big deal because the way in which we collectively respond, and so before we get off of that item, when a CATS item comes in, there's 7 commissioners, we want to make sure, and typically it goes out to the department, okay?
Right.
So it's, my road is broke, whatever, okay? Comes in, the department gives you a response. We've typically tried to have then the chair's office respond to that as as kind of the county's response. So I want to understand how we're going to do that because, if we have different responses that could confuse the resident, or set up different expectations.
Well, and that's true, but if each district did the CATS item, so if it were my district, I would do it. If it was Commissioner Latval's district, they would do it. If it was Commissioner Flowers' district, she would do it. And who's the fourth one? Dave. If it's Commissioner Eggers' district, he would do it. Now, so therefore, you got one person doing the CATS item, because it would strictly be the district people that are doing it, and the at-large people can respond just to say, I understand, and maybe not file the CATS report. So you still would only have one person, and it would be subject to where that constituent lives. So it would either be me filing that CATS report, Commissioner Eggers filing it for North County, Commissioner Latvala filing it for his portion of North County, and Commissioner Flowers for her portion of South County. So it's still only one entry of CATS.
I'm okay. I just want to make sure we have a collective response, because you may have a constituent and you say they complain about the neighbors' junk and debris, okay? And you go, yeah, that's junk and debris. Commissioner Eggers may interpret that as, no, that's private property. They do whatever they want, right? And yet we have a staff interpretation that is actually baked into state law in terms of how you interpret that. I just want to make sure we have a consistent response on these. It's kind of, I'm sorry to get off on this, but it's really a big deal. It's really a big deal between staff's interpretation and commissioner's interpretation, of issues. And
But if only one person is entering CATS, you still have, if that person determines that it's property rights and it's not a nuisance, you still have that. So
I just want to make sure
changing.
that I want to make sure that we have the staff's response on that, because the staff actually has the responsibility to enforce the law, not the commissioner, right?
Right.
And so that's a concern that I have. I
Right.
just want to make sure
But the
so
example.
your response is constituent service, but you're still going to make sure that the staff, you engage staff to be able to give a proper response on it.
Right. So every legislative aid, every commissioner's office that's a district office would have to do the CATS, enter it into CATS. And hopefully when we have new software, it will be less cumbersome and they could do it more easily. But that example you gave of the interpretation, I think you still have that if one person is doing it, because it's still one person's interpretation, right?
Well, I just want to make sure since we're talking about it, I want to make sure that, again, commissioners individually are not charged with making that interpretation. Staff has to enforce.
Staff has to do it. Well, and that's what I'm saying. So if it comes in, then it's. Right. Right.
Okay. I know. So just so we're clear, so whoever it's going to, so if you're making that change, then the commissioner's response is, we have this, we're looking into it, we'll get back to you. And then you're going to forward that to the department.
Right. I mean, that's what we do now. If we get an individual one now that just comes to our district, that's what we do. We fill out a CATS and it goes. So I think changing Jamie to administration, or that position to administration, that to me was the biggest, more than the front door, because the front door we've only had 4 people come. So to me, this is the more important thing. But anything that comes to Commissioner Eggers' office that's just to Commissioner Eggers, he currently puts it into CATS and deals with it. So it's really no different if it comes to all 7 of us. Wherever the location is, it's the responsibility of that district's office to put it into CATS. And so that was the big hangup, but I don't really think that's as big of a hangup as it should be, because we already are doing it anyways.
Okay.
And if I could interject one thing, keeping in mind that the county attorney's office is really largely not involved in CATS, just a reminder to throw out to all of you guys as far as how this works. Keep in mind that there is the non-interference clause in our charter. So commissioners should not be directing staff on how to act, and you should continue to be working with the administrator as far as, getting plans to address the pothole or whatever it is they may be complaining of. Again, I'm not as familiar with how CATS works currently, but I just want to throw that out there as a warning to make sure that that doesn't get lost in translation as far as perhaps a new process of handling things.
Well, the only drawback is that some will drop through the cracks. And that's just the way it's going to be. When you decentralize it like this, that's what's going to happen. There'll be some that, well, I thought it was his district, and he said, no, it was your district. And, and the conversations between aides occur sometimes because they're on the floor, and sometimes it's not, So one will drop a day or two or three or whatever it is until they can get. Look, I don't do this. It's really Stacy in my office that does it,
Right.
and we get in a bunch of them, typically. Not as much as we used to, but we get a lot of them for the
and
unincorporated area.
Because you have a
There's
large unincorporated area. Yes.
But I'm just saying, when you do split it up, there will be some that drop that don't get answered.
Right. And so just some of the other things that that person.
But real quickly, 4
Yeah.
people on the floor. I know Stacy's answered the door at least 4 times. I can't even. She's here all the time.
Yeah.
I tried to keep her at home on Monday and Friday, but she answers the door a lot when people aren't in the front. So I'm just saying it's not 4.
Okay,
So whatever
so
it is.
as you know, I'm not on that floor, not in that building, but when I asked how many, I got 4. So since January, I got 4. So if somebody else is coming and knocking on the door, then I didn't know about that. So this is just for conversation. We're not making a decision today, it's for conversation, but, so that person, proclamations really falls in the chair's office to approve those. Board and committee appointments would be administrative. Where's the other? So inventory, we do once a year. We could do inventory, that's not a problem. Supply orders, so that person was doing the supply orders for everybody. I think our staff are capable of ordering their own supplies. I don't know that we need to have one single person to be ordering the supplies. Certificates are something our staff can handle within our office. Soliciting clergy, that's something that could be done through the chair's office. I don't think it necessarily has to have one person that does it. We could also, and I know I've mentioned it before, we could even go to our commissioners doing prayers versus inviting people in. I like inviting people in. I think it's nice to have representatives of our faith come in. But again, I think that's something that could be the chair's office. But when I started looking at the document that was used several years ago to kind of justify that position, the vast majority of that stuff is stuff that could be done in our office. And if we're ordering our own supplies and we have our own budget, then we're ordering supplies based on what our budget is. Versus a shared budget and somebody's ordering a ton of supplies. And, it's like before, one commissioner wasn't using, we had a shared budget with everybody, and if one wasn't using their travel, another commission would use that commissioner's travel. And we kind of changed that for more transparency and accountability. But why is it any different with supplies? Because you can have one commissioner that's ordering thousands of dollars in supplies, and some that don't order many supplies at all, and it's the same kind of thing. It's like, let's hold ourselves accountable to our budgets, have independent budgets, and then how, like you said, if we have a designated budget, then we know exactly what we can do for travel, or what we could do if we want to give raises to our staff, what we could do when we're ordering supplies, versus some of it being our budget and then some of it's a shared budget. I just think it's easier to have individual budgets because we already have them, and then we have this extra budget over here. And so instead, save the money on the lease copy machine, put that FTE in admin. All of us operate in our own budget, in our own offices, and I honestly think a lot of the issues that happen on the 5th floor could go away. Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you've covered a lot. A couple of things, having your own office budget, I really like that idea. I think that's great. As far as CATS is concerned, only having single member districts enter that CATS, I'm concerned that something may fall through the cracks, as Commissioner Eggers has suggested it could. I mean, we can try it to see how it goes, but I think it's something we have to monitor, because I am worried about no response or inconsistent responses. So I am a little concerned about that. Having somebody there at the receptionist desk is, in a lot of cases, I think, a waste of a space. Jamie's not there a lot anyways. But if you have one person that shows up there and is waiting for 30 minutes and just nobody comes by, that's a problem. So if we're going to eliminate that position and have it moved to the 6th floor, then we have to have a phone or something where somebody can buzz in and say.
There is one.
Is there one?
Yeah.
Okay.
There is one. Yeah.
Okay.
So when I've come up the last 4 or 5 times, there hasn't been anybody at that desk. Hasn't been anybody at that desk, and I have had to pick up the phone and call Stacy. So one of those people she's letting in is myself, because if you don't have your badge, or you forgot it or whatever, you can't get in. So there's that.
I ran, the only reason I bring that up is because I walked into the office one day last week, and there were 2 people sitting in the reception area there, and they didn't know what to do. So maybe we need better signage or better directions or something like that.
Yeah, and there used to be signage there, but I haven't been up there in a while, so I don't know what it all says, but there was signage. Commissioner Flowers has her hand up, and I don't want to admit that.
Is Commissioner Scott finished? I didn't want to,
Yes.
Oh, okay. So first of all, I apologize for not reading your document in full. I was at the funeral yesterday, so I didn't read it in full. I just kind of scanned it briefly. I know today is not a decision day. I like to take a little more time to think about this. I'm not rehashing old things, just saying you all have heard, what I've had to say before and what I have instructed Darlena to do when it comes to ordering office supplies and things like that. And making copies or whatever. So Commissioner Peters on that, in that vein, that's something that I already have her doing internally within my office. I do want to think about this a little bit more. I was of the assumption that perhaps traffic up in our offices either dwindled or, is nominal because as a result of COVID, persons were choosing to meet virtually. I know for me, I try to make my meetings more accommodating for the person. So if they live South County, I meet them somewhere in South County. If they live mid-county, et cetera, I don't want to have them driving all the way to Clearwater for us to meet for maybe like 30 minutes. I just think that that's a courtesy that I like to provide for the people I meet with. So I meet in various locations and have gotten the support of Mr. Twitty, and I meet at Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council offices. I meet at the Epicenter, wherever it's going to be convenient for the person. But I do think that it depends on who the chair is as it relates to how much work is generated, in addition to the things that Commissioner Peters mentioned that they do for day-to-day office, things that come up. So I need to look at this a little bit more, but at this point, I'm kind of not comfortable with that. The other question I have would be, so what if someone is looking for help or assistance, because this has come up before, and then you're asking if that person doesn't have anything to do where the chair's office is using them, can that person assist your aide or whatever in getting something done? And that's kind of like a back and forth. So if that position moves to Barry's office, then are we still, able to ask for assistance from that person? Who do we have to go through? Who's making the final decisions and choices? Just a lot of questions I have in that. I do think the position, though, is valuable to our offices. As it relates to budgets and maybe bringing in your aide's budget to your aide's salary and whatnot into your office for a budget, I don't have a problem with doing that. I think we need to really talk about some parameters by which some of those salary adjustments will or could be made. You know, Darlena's been around way before I got here. She was there 20 years with Ken and now the years with me. So of course her salary is more than others because she's been here longer. And so, you know, how will we make that, how will we look at the range, if you will, of salaries? Because, you know, someone who just came in may not be right where others who have been here a little bit longer, Courtney and others. So I'd like to take a look at that. And I'll stop my comments for there and then I'll re-raise my hand for something that I asked as it relates to a decision package when it comes to our office. But those are my thoughts. But I will, Commissioner Peters, I will read your document more thoroughly. I do apologize again for not having read it in advance of the meeting today.
And that's
Or not
fine.
thoroughly read it.
And if you want the other older document, I'm happy to send it to you. But I won't belabor that. But there are two separate things here, that position and then the budget. So Commissioner Eggers.
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
So again, you know, we do have a couple of things we can specifically talk about, but one of the reasons again, I'm not trying to rehash, and I'm not saying the way we used to do it's the way we should be doing it, but we all have different uses of our aids. So we could, in theory, work from home 5 days, or travel, follow your commissioner, or however, so maybe nobody on the floor, in theory. And it happens a lot that there's not everybody on the floor. There may be one person on the floor. That was what drove the kind of, again, I'm not saying it's the only reason we looked to have somebody out front, but it was to do a lot of the jobs that you've discussed, but also to have a presence on the floor. I mean, it's somewhat embarrassing, you know, if somebody comes by at 2 o'clock on a Friday afternoon and says, hey, I want to talk to a commissioner. If somebody tested the system like they did down in St. Petersburg, there'd be nobody, you know, potentially be nobody on the floor. I just think we have to think about that. The printer and other things like that, I mean, the printer, at least maybe mine's different, but mine's a black and white printer in my office. So you've got one expensive color printer that we're now going to make into 7, because we need to have the ability to have a color printer. So we're all going to have 7 color printers instead of 1. And that's just an example. And then all of the supplies that are there, I guess somebody in the chair's office and monitor them. So when you go in and open up and say, oh, the pens are getting low, I'm going to order some pens. And we don't just individually do that, or do we each have our own stock of the whole stock room in our own office so that we monitor and order our own pens?
Yep.
Okay. So get rid of basically getting rid of that one room that has all the centralized stuff. And that's the same issue with the printer. I think you just have some things that it's beneficial to have all of us using. But again, those are just some comments about managing the floor.
And the only reason I said if you took the lease away, and I don't know how much that lease is, but printers are not that expensive anymore. And they do scanning and they do color, and the ink cartridges are there, so that would strictly be under your purview. So if you're someone that's going to be printing up thousands of things a month that are in color, then that cost of that ink falls on your department and your budget versus everybody.
Well, no, I'm not talking about thousands. I'm just having
I'm
just
giving
talking
an
about having
example.
access to a color printer.
Right.
That's all.
So my point is, if you don't have that large colored printer, or you keep the lease and everybody uses that printer versus allocating a section of that printer to each office, because right now that's what we do. So we allocate part of that lease and what was used in those supplies to each department, where I'm saying you get rid of that shared stuff and have each. So the savings on the lease of the copier and the managing of separating all that stuff out all year round is everybody has a color printer. Printers are not that expensive anymore. That way you can print your own color things, you can scan your own color things in your own office. And again, if, let's say I'm gonna do an event and I'm gonna start doing town halls, and I'm gonna print up 200 flyers for every one of my town halls, that comes out of my own budget. It doesn't go across a shared budget. So therefore, there's much more transparency and more accountability for how we're spending that taxpayer money, and it's in our budget. So if I'm going to do 250 flyers a month, but you never print a flyer, right now, your budget is taken, you're absorbing my costs. So what I'm saying is.
I complain about that every year.
I know, and so what I'm saying is everybody's going to have their own budget, and they're going to be accountable for their own budget. And I'm not implying anybody here is misusing it. I'm not implying that at all. That doesn't mean future people coming in would misuse it. But I think if we all have a budget, we have parameters of which we can work in. We know what our supply budget, I mean, every other job I had a supply budget, a line item budget, I had my technology budget. And if I'm going to plan on a new computer, I know to plan on it, and I know that has to go with licensing, and we have to do it on a rotating basis to make sure our licenses stay with them. But, you know, I just don't think that Commissioner Justice has to come to me and say, I want a new laptop, Madam Chair. Can I have a new laptop? I don't think that it needs how it goes. I think it needs to go a different way. It doesn't.
I remember when we first got here, I was thinking that it would be a real simple solution to rotate having one person on the floor. And everybody looked at me like I was crazy. Like each of us have a schedule, so make sure that we have somebody on the floor. Because I'm telling you, there are times where there would be nobody on the floor. And if that doesn't bother you, it bothers me. And so, you know, if we take turns and have schedules so that, I know Stacy's going to be there on Monday and everybody's going to have a day and it just rotates through. So you have how many days? 4 days a month that you have to be there. That's not that much. I mean, just to make sure that we're covered on that front, that's an element of it. And then what you're talking about, you're going to have, and we're just talking about the pendulum and the trade-offs of doing this, because there are going to be trade-offs either way we do it.
Well, I think the budget is one subject. I think the administrative person is a different subject. Christopher Latvala, Commissioner Latvala.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to echo what Commissioner Eggers just said. I do think it's important to have somebody there, whether it's the dedicated employee that we're talking about or somebody just, for the instance that there's going to be a walk-in. I had a walk-in in my office last week. This week I locked myself out of the office and Commissioner Eggers' aide had to let me in. So that was another instance that there was nobody at the front desk to be able to buzz in. So I think it's important to have somebody on the floor. Okay. I'm kind of agnostic about whether or not the employee that we're talking about be a county administrative employee or somebody that works for us, because I do think that we could have a roving system with our aides to man that front desk. Or if we have signage or phones or something where people that walk in can get a hold of us. The other thing, though, I wanted to talk about had to do with our office budgets. I'm fine with that, having each individual office budgets, as long as there's parameters and policies set in place, so it's not just willy-nilly. One thing, though, that you mentioned that I'm have some concerns about is regards to our giving our aides raises from that salary. When one of the very first meetings I had with Barry 2 years ago had to do with hiring an aide and setting their salary. And he showed me the range of the aide salaries and said, you determined, what your aide makes. And I don't remember, and I don't even think there was even names on the ranges. But I remember I said, I want my aide to be tied with the lowest on the range. And so, my aide was the tied for whoever was the lowest at the time. But now I, think that it's that he's, earned somewhat of a raise, not a substantial one, but a few $1,000. but I don't want that to come from my budget when it was, told to me 2 years ago that, we set our aide salaries and they're quite good. And we, had a recent budget amendment for aide salaries, before we talked about the, having individual budgets. And so, I think if we're, like in using legislative lingo, if we have like an OPS person, or if we're hiring like a college kid that we're paying $15 an hour, like I think that would be applicable, to maybe use from our budget. But I think in terms of giving your aide just a raise from that budget, I think that that should follow the process that this commission has had for years.
Okay, I think that's reasonable. And we are talking about maybe bringing in a policy on how we manage raises for staff, but it's just another conversation and a workshop on another day. But you're right about if you want to bring in an intern or OPS, and so like when Commissioner Flowers, if she knew she had a big project coming up and she wanted to bring in a temporary person, and she maybe foresaw that when we were doing our budget, then it could be put in the budget. But it does hunt accountability, and it kind of gives us accountability and parameters on what we're doing and what we can do. And Barry, I see you want to talk, so go ahead.
Well, I'm actually okay with commissioners kind of having this out because, this is always a touchy issue. I mean, you approve a $2.7 billion budget. We'll probably spend more time on this than you will on the rest of your budget. And I understand that. It's sensitive. It's back to you personally, right? And, and so I think the idea of hashing out ideas and then we can come back with some ideas and kind of further flush some of this out. The things that get sensitive when you talk about individual budgets is how that budget's crafted. Can the commissioner then tell me and I just bake it into the budget? Okay, so is it a fixed amount for all commissioners, or, because that's the position I get in. If I come over and I work with one commissioner and I say, and he says, okay, I want this, well then I can tell you 2 other commissioners are going to go, wait a minute, we didn't approve that, right? And that's the position I get boxed in. So think about the way in which you want, and I'm okay with however you want, it's your budget. But you need to have consensus among the group in terms of how you want to advance individual items. And there are some specific items I think we should go through separate from the salaries that we need to talk about. Commissioner Flowers, for instance, is on a national committee, right?
Right, and I was going to mention that, but.
So how does that work with travel and things like that? And those are the types of things I need guidance from you on in terms of how we should manage those.
So, and again, if we're holding our department staffs to a flat budget, I think we ought to be holding ourselves to a flat budget. You know what I mean? Commissioner Justice.
Thank you. And I didn't get a chance to go completely through it this morning from when we got the memo, but just from what I'm seeing, and this goes back, this has evolved over a decade. Back in the old days, there were all these duties that were actually done on a routine basis, and they were split among the 7 aides. And then, quite frankly, and this is one of those conversations that I would have preferred that we would have had in the 5th floor conference room, not necessarily televised, or some other location, that we could go through some of these things. But we talked about this position being under the commission or being under the administrator. And quite frankly, I don't know if the administrator and his staff wants this position under them today. So I don't know if we've had that discussion. But so all those duties were split among the 7, and then quite frankly, some of the 7 weren't carrying their weight. And so then things were falling through the cracks, and then the boards and committees became much more procedural than it was. I mean, in the old days, it was a notebook, and when it went online, it became procedural, and every board and every committee had a different requirement. Some are 3-year terms, some needs to be a profession, some to be geography, that it was helpful to have one person who actually understood all those things, or at least knew where to look. So that's where a lot of this came from. And so we've had three people in that front position. We had Nikki, and then Kelly, and now Jamie. We've only been doing this since 21, mid 21, I think.
Stacy was in there too.
I apologize, Stacy. We haven't done it that long, but to the point, and the other second part is to the budget. I kind of thought we did have our own budgets. We have a shared part for the printer, right, and the supplies, but everything else, that 11,000 or whatever it is to pay for postage, individual expenses that may be unique to your office, and conference travel. And that's kind of how most people have used it, right? So I guess I don't, my concern is with Commissioner Eggers, if you want access to a color printer, we may only use that twice a month, that we would need to go out and buy a color printer to use twice a month now versus the lease. And I don't know what the cost differential is. I don't know what our shared cost on that is. Anyway, so again, first blush, I don't have any problem with accountability or transparency and all of us being responsible for our own budgets. Like you said, we did that. But we didn't, out of that budget, we didn't pay our staff salary. That was designated by the legislative body, or in this case, by the county. When I came on and when I hired my current assistant, we actually had HR review and go through her resume and her background and help designate, based on qualification, here's the range where they should be at. And so it wasn't just me picking a number. So anyway, I do think it's always good to look at how you do things every once in a while, make sure it's not just because we've always done it this way. So I have no problem with looking at it and making some changes where necessary. I think that's good. But I do think we could have maybe a more informal conversation about this to go through some of these issues.
Okay. Great. Janet?
Well, I didn't know we were going to get this depth into it today, and I'm watching the clock because I'm really late. But I just want you to know, I have a colored printer in my office that we paid for. It was about $300-something. Works just fabulous. But I'm still being dinged for the big printer in my monthly budget. And so, I just think we don't communicate enough maybe with Chris when we're doing things that impact the budget or our individual office. I was thrilled, actually it was when I had Mary Scott, because she was just incredibly bright, and she discovered that, yeah, we do have our own individual office budgets. And I found it just so funny that when we brought that up in a public meeting, you might remember this, Charlie, our county administrator at the time, Bob LaSala, kept saying, no, you don't. You don't have your own individual budget. But we knew we did. It just tickled me when he did that. So anyway, I do think there are some things that we are probably supposed to be covering in our budget workshops. And our staff, fifth floor staff salaries are one of the ones that I wanted to be able to talk about. And I think that's a very in-depth discussion as well. Maybe we could move the whole topic over till tomorrow and come back again after we've all had an opportunity to really think it through. Because you talked about transparency and accountability, but that issue isn't anywhere in here on this general fund Board of County Commissioners.
Right.
Unless I'm just not looking at it right.
And yes, and I know that's going to come up in a workshop, but I am okay if you don't want staff salary in our budget. I'm okay with that too. It's just the idea of everybody being responsible for one. And then if you're not, in favor of moving that position, that's fine too, or working out another solution, that's fine too. I'm just bringing it up for the sake of conversation. I do think it's a good idea on the budget. And there are some things that Jamie does that is what I consider to be more administrative. I know Della went over that sheet and said, yeah, that's kind of administrative, that's administrative, that's administrative.
So we can, to answer to your question, I mean, we can assume that, okay? We can assume those duties, but it can't be a shared responsibility, okay? It can't have that person pulled, right? So the aides would have to coordinate all the other activities. But in terms of boards and committees and all that, we can either assume it all, or leave it as it is and leave the position with the chair. Either way, but we, just need to make a clean, break, on that.
So, any other comments, discussion, thoughts?
You do have some decision packages the commissioners have, discussed. And you've kind of danced around, one issue, which is individual aid salaries, right? Okay, because there's some that want to have that discussion. And this is a public meeting. They have to be a public meeting when you guys meet and discuss something that you're going to vote on. But it doesn't mean that we have to have the camera on, and I can kick staff out and we can kick aides out, And I mean, you're talking about individuals, and I'm sorry, but that should be an executive session item, but under Florida law, it isn't,
So what are the decision packages?
So absent salaries, okay, you have a couple things. One, Commissioner, you put in for a new CAT system. We have that in BTS. I don't think it needs to be addressed through your decision package process, okay? Commissioner Scott wants us to have gunships and stuff to nail these short-term rentals. He wants to enforce. He wants to do what Jude wants to do, is come down and catch them when they have a party. We did. Yeah, but if we're okay with that, we can remove that from that because we're addressing that through the departmental budget. If you're okay with that, okay. So we can remove that from the request for CATS items. Two commissioners asked for this arts conservatory for teens and $200,000. In my opinion, that should be handled through social action funding, and they should compete with every other, social action funding program that we have. But again, I defer that to the commissioners that requested it.
So I would agree. If we start handing out money to nonprofits through our budget process, through the commission budget, I don't think it should come from the commission budget.
And that's how we did this 6 years ago. We were getting a lot of it, just so you know, when I got here, you were getting a lot of individual requests. And so you were funding those individually by commissioners. Well, you don't have enough money to fund that. So we created the social action funding, and then we made it a competitive, grant process.
Well, social action funding has been around a long time.
Yes, that was one component, but we also had individual components. We combined them. And then so we created a bigger fund, and that's how we managed that.
So I like that it's a process and it's transparent. I'm not comfortable with putting in the commissioner's budget special projects for nonprofits. I don't know about the rest of you. Y'all have thoughts on that? With microphone.
No, I don't think those should be in our budget at all. That's not. I was just going to ask, did we get a copy of the request for decision packages from commissioners?
I haven't seen it.
I have copies. What?
I mean, I just didn't see any of this.
I have all the decision packages right here.
Right.
This is Commissioner Flowers. I did send out the requests, the two requests that I made. And just really quickly, I was one of the persons, I don't know who the other was, that submitted the information on behalf of Alex Harris with his organization. He did, in fact, receive some funds from during COVID. He got funds through Creative Pinellas through that process. And when Commissioner Welch was a commissioner, he was able to receive some support from, he got vans through the oil spill, from the oil spill funding that we did, in fact, receive. I put it, let me say this, and I understand what Barry's thought process is, but whenever we have a constituent come to us and ask us for something, whether we think it'll go through or not, I think, for me, I have an obligation at least to put it out on the table because they're asked. And if the proposal, defines and shows what it's going to be, I think I have an obligation to do that. The other reason I submitted it is because when I read his brief proposal, it is more from an economic development side and not just from an education side. I did share with him that, we're looking at some potential millage reductions that the administrator had asked for various departments to come in with flat budgets. And I did ask him if he had ever applied for support through our social service department program. And he stated he did not. So, he provided me with a proposal. I think it's a really good proposal. I've shopped it to other entities as well. Because we just had a conversation today about not being able to attract employees. Well, here's an opportunity that he has where those individuals will get that training that could potentially put them in line to be those frontline workers that the clerk's office is looking for, or that the tax collector's office, et cetera, et cetera. So that is why I submitted it. But I did submit it. The decision package request. I did send an email and I attached the document that he provided. I'm happy to have Darlena resend that to you guys. And I think Barry just said he had it. The only other decision package request was from me. In light of me moving up to be first vice president and then being appointed to National Housing Committee and traveling, I have additional expenses that go along with those meetings. It's nothing, over the top. It's just, those expenses for traveling and not just serving as the first VP, but representing our county and our wishes as well. So I had Darlena go through all of my expenditures. And then I pulled out things that I have paid for out of my pocket rather than having them come out through my budget because I was over budget. And so I submitted a request for an additional I think it was $3,500 or $3,000. I'm sorry. $3,500 for the next fiscal year that would support my attending the meetings because the executive team meets more than FAC for conferences and whatnot. So those were my two decision packages requests. One was $3,500, and I put that in writing so you guys could see what it's all for if you want. I can also share with you the breakdown of my expenditures because I do have that on an Excel spreadsheet if you need that from me. And then the question that I have is, what's going on or what's the exact process when it comes to an update of your laptop or your iPad? Okay. When I came on board, of course I got a device. Commissioner Welch at the time was turning in his device and whatnot. I'm sorry. And then when it came time to renew, I got a call. I was told, hey, we're going to come in. You need to update you're going to give you another laptop or whatever. And that was fine. And I did whatever they told me to do. So that time was rolling around again. On one hand, I got that, yes, your devices are going to be replaced. On the other hand, I got, well, no, that doesn't come from us. You need to put that in your office budget, which I had never done before. So I would like some clarity today on that so that I can do whatever is the consensus across the board on how we will how to replace, to upgrade your laptop and or iPad. And then the final thing I want to say is, Commissioner Eggers, I did hear you when you were asking for aides to help share in covering the floor and whatnot. And the very same day that you made that request, I then contacted my aide and I have her in the office 3 days out of the week. So I just wanted to share, Commissioner Eggers, that I did hear you and I have her there 3 days out of the week. And my communication with Darlena was, hey, whatever help is needed when you're there in the office on those 3 days out of the week, please, lend your support, lend your assistance in any way possible. And the other days, you all see her. She's at our workshops or at our meetings. Sometimes I have her over in her office doing things while we're in our meetings. And then I of course, utilize her when I'm going out and about in the community, because it's just additional hands. So I just want to try to get all that in really quickly.
Okay.
But thank you for your time. Thank you for the time.
If I can, so we have computer replacements built into the shared account. However, if there's additional requests, that's where we don't have a policy or anything, guidance from the commission. So for instance, an aide wants to have their computer and then have an additional one for home, or they want an iPad separate from that. Those are the things that kind of come up that we don't necessarily have any guidance on how you want us to handle that, okay? So we typically don't do two shared, okay, or two computers, but we have in certain instances and stuff. So I have administrative policies on how to handle that. I don't for commissioners because I work for you, okay?
Right.
And so those are the things that come up that we just got, I mean, it's uncomfortable, but we need to kind of have I need to know how to handle these, right? You know, because that is what comes up.
So, and that could fall into individual budgets, but I do think we're going to develop a policy because we're still working on that book. We are still working on that handbook. So there will be hopefully something that we'll discuss on a policy for that. But again, if that was in an individual budget, it's in an individual budget.
So we have that. I mean, you're kind of coming down to it, though. You really don't have that much here. I mean, if we agree on the one, you've got the travel for Commissioner Flowers, that she is on these national committees that will require additional travel, and you've got the that I just spoke of, and then the Clearwater Memorial Day Parade. You know, that's besides salaries. That's really it for commissioner decision packages.
Okay, so Commissioner Long has a comment.
Well, I was kind of surprised when I saw that, because I made the mistake of stepping out for the ladies' room. But I don't know what this Arts Conservatory for Teens, 200,000, and it's recurring. I don't recall ever making that request, so I'm not sure who put it in on my behalf.
Well, Chris?
I received an email from Tony a few weeks ago on that topic.
Okay.
Blame it on Tony.
I'm not sure where he got that directive, maybe, but you can take it off because yeah.
Okay.
Any other discussion? And we got two
Did
other
Tony put that large screen TV in for me?
I just asked Jewel if we had the ability to meet on the 5th floor in the conference room for further discussion. I don't mean
No.
today, and we do.
We could meet in another place, but we will not meet on the 5th floor. We will not meet on the 5th floor.
What's that?
Dave,
we'll meet in any other building.
We can meet in any other building. Yeah,
Wherever we can get together
Yes.
is really the most important point and have the discussion.
Okay, so.
And you can,
Because this is just,
Well, so on that stuff, but on the decision package, this was for the budget. So we talked about Renee being in that position and traveling before in a workshop, and I thought then we had consensus that we would have travel. Is that true? So everyone has consensus that she would get that additional in her budget for travel? You're fine with that?
Okay, we'll incorporate that in.
Okay, and then the last one, I didn't get consensus on giving money to a parade or to a nonprofit without going through a competitive process through the commission's budget. I heard Charlie said he didn't support that. You'd rather have a process. You said that you didn't want it in the commission's budget.
Right, I didn't want it within our budget.
Bob
Whether we
Swick.
approve it in another line, that's a different,
Okay,
I don't think it should be in our office budget.
it shouldn't be in our office
My
budget.
recommendation is that any of these types of requests, you put them over to social action funding because that way they compete.
Okay, so that covers,
With all due respect, I've already contacted Mr. Harris and just told him that I think he would need to follow through the process. For what I said before, we're looking at some adjustments, and everybody was asked to come in flat, and that he had received funds from other arenas, but that he should apply through the social action funding process, just so you'll know, I already asked them to do that.
Okay, thank you. And so I think, is that it on the commission budget?
Memorial Day Parade.
Same.
Okay. Okay. Very good.
Okay, so that was on the decision package. I think on the other subjects, do we need, I think definitely on that other person, you're implying you want to have a meeting off-site, not on camera, to talk about that stuff?
Yeah.
We're going to have that discussion, and people can still come and listen to
Right.
it. It's just that we ought to just.
If you're okay, commissioners, you know, we'll add it to the end of the meeting. It is a public meeting, but we'll add it to the end of the meeting. It won't be on camera, because we're talking about individuals, okay? And it is all there's no decision made there. It's simply then what we can bake into the budget, which will be voted on publicly. So.
And, you know, again, I think the individual budget idea that you're talking about makes some sense. But I also have an interest that the other 6 offices don't waste money either. And I represent taxpayers as well.
Right.
And so there is that element that comes into play that we need to have that kind of conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right, we're each ultimately individually responsible, but, you know, we're approving all kinds of budgets. And I think we ought to see what everybody has in mind.
Okay. So do you want to have this conversation tomorrow at the end of that meeting?
We can certainly look to tomorrow. I'll order lunch.
Okay. Thank you, Janet.
You know, but we can do that tomorrow. We can try that tomorrow, and I think limit your discussion. You have plenty of time. We're not going to adopt the budget till September, okay? And the type of adjustments you're making are so minuscule in terms of the overall budget. It's immaterial to me building a budget, you know? So.
Thank you for indulging me. I appreciate it. I think it's always good to have those conversations, and I hope you have a great rest of the day, and the meeting is adjourned. Oh, wait, we're not
Sorry,
adjourned. Wait.
Commissioners, I have one other request. So to Commissioner Scott, you asked about the reunification center and whether or not that has any long-term cost. It does not. The sheriff simply will store it, bring it out like he does with all of his other equipment, and service it. Any repairs or things he can absorb within his overall budget. But here's the additional request, because actually Commissioner Justice brought this up. Could we go ahead and do that this year? If it's one-time cost, so rather than waiting until next year, we could have, I talked to the sheriff, he could actually have that up and available this hurricane season just in case. I'll bring you an amendment.
Just shuffle reserves around.
I will bring an amendment, and we'll fund it in this year's, and we'll just backfill that as part of the budget.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay, so if you're okay, I'll bring that for July, and we'll get that going. You know, the sheriff, he'll have it here next week probably, but you know, but we'll just get that process going if you're okay.
That was a great idea.
Okay.
Good thinking.
Every once in a while.
It was really good. That's a really good idea.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if that's it, have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.
Thank you for letting me.